to order. Welcome to the Midcoast Community Council meeting of October 25th, 2017. Will the council members introduce themselves?
Chris Johnson.
Dan Haggerty.
Claire Touton.
Lisa Ketchum.
Dave Olson.
Brandon Kwan.
Thank you. The first item on our agenda is the Board of Supervisors report. And we have Ellie Dahlman, Supervisor Horsley's aide, here.
Alrighty. Good evening, Midcoast Community Council, Midcoast community members. My name is Ellie Dahlman. I'm here on behalf of Supervisor Don Horsley to provide a few brief updates. The first thing I'll just announce is a few weeks ago we held the ribbon cutting celebration for the completion of a Princeton Street End Improvement Project. So if you haven't already, I'd encourage you all to go visit the end of Broadway Street in Princeton, overlooking the Princeton Harbor. The Parks Department and Public Works installed 2 new benches, moved the guardrail back to separate the cars and the pedestrians, and also installed a an informational sign that has some information about the history of the Princeton Packers Pier. We're hoping to, or we will be, continuing to look at the next street ends. I've begun conversations with Public Works regarding improving access to the beach there, looking at Columbia and then Vassar are the next 2 street ends. It sounds like we will be, with Vassar, we'll actually be, DPW will develop some plans that we'll bring to you for review. For Columbia, it's a little bit more complicated because it is such a steep drop from where the roadway ends to the beach. And so before they start taking time to develop plans, I believe they'll be doing some survey work to get a better sense of what we're working with, what the soil's like, if we're going to be grading or adding steps or moving the dirt at the end of that street, just making sure that we know what sort of, if it's a retaining wall that might be needed or what. So we'll be coming back to you with more information about that as well. And thank you again for your input for the benches and the sign. I think the benches that were chosen, they're really, really, really beautiful wooden. I'm glad they're not cement, just the typical bench style that the county often puts out. The next item I have is just to let you know, I know some of you may be aware of some of the challenges with the homeless population near the Safeway in Half Moon Bay. And the county, Supervisor Horsley, is actively working with the city of Half Moon Bay to kind of address that issue and the challenges there. And Supervisor Horsley also asked me to tell you that he was able to open up around 20 to 30 new beds in their shelter, one of the homeless shelters. So that'll hopefully provide space for some of the people that will be displaced from the creek behind Safeway.
Can I ask where these beds are not local, right?
I can double check and find out where they are.
No.
The next item is just to let you know that the Half Moon Bay Airport Pilots Association is holding their disaster airlift response team exercise this Saturday from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. at the Half Moon Bay Airport. And they'll practice receiving supplies from inbound aircraft, schedule and handle potential transportation requests, primarily to practice receiving and load procedures for ambulatory medical versus non-medical passengers. And then they'll have barbecue and refreshments after, but just wanted to let you know that that's happening. I'm sure that information's been published, but Supervisor Horsley asked me to share the info with you. And then lastly, just wanted to provide a brief update. Had a meeting with our consultant for the Parallel Trail project, which is, for those of you not familiar, the county is currently working to design a bicycle and pedestrian 2-way trail that would stretch from Marauder Road, where the Half Moon Bay jurisdiction ends, all the way north to Coronado Street, and it would be a pathway that's directly east of Highway 1. So really hoping to serve the residents of the Miramar and the different, and El Granada as well. Ideally, one day it will connect to the Naomi Patridge Trail with Half Moon Bay, so you'll have an option east of Highway 1 to get from Half Moon Bay all the way up to El Granada and even further north. But we met with our consultants today briefly. They are working on preparing the 60% plans. We hope to have those by next month. We've encountered some challenges because it's in Caltrans right-of-way and because the trail includes two structures. One is a steel bridge over the creek, and then the other would be a retaining wall through the willow thicket area that butts right up to Highway 1. Caltrans requires that we do a type selection report to go through what the structures look like, and they're pretty particular about what they allow and don't allow and the criteria for the design of the bridge. So that's kind of where we are. We're working through that before the consultant will be able to deliver the 60% plans for comment from Public Works and Caltrans. And we'll also share an update with you as well. But that's kind of all I have on that front. And then for Graywell Cove, we are also in the process of making sure Caltrans has the information that they need to allocate resources, their staff time to work on the Graywell Cove crosswalk project that's also will be designed. The design process will be led by the county, working with the Transportation Authority, and then for actual construction, Caltrans will be implementing improvements in the right-of-way there at Graywell Cove. So that's all I have. If there's any questions or comments.
Any questions for Ellen?
The only comment I have is please pass our thanks on to whoever in Parks or Public Works built those benches.
Yeah.
They did a great job.
Yeah.
I have a question. So I understand that there was a meeting with Caltrans, and I'm sure the county was there, but somebody from Caltrans said that an overcrossing or possibly an undercrossing would not be out of the would not be off the table in Caltrans' point of view. Is that
Yes, that.
is there
So
anything-
when we met with them, they did say that. I think the challenge really would come to the cost in order to do those improvements, and for the at-grade crossing that we're looking at currently, we're already kind of struggling to find funding. We have funding for the design process, but the construction is, we're looking for funding to fulfill just the at-grade crossing. And if we start talking about for the above grade, my understanding is that the cost to implement an above grade crossing for the construction, as well as the environmental kind of impact that having an above grade crossing, it would have a larger kind of footprint and impact in terms of moving earth and installing additional structures. So those are kind of the key challenges that I'm aware of that would keep us from the above grade.
Can you refresh my memory as to where the financing is coming from for this?
Yes. For Graywell Cove, the county received a grant from the Transportation Authority a while back that funded a preliminary planning study that developed preliminary plans for a number of intersections along Highway 1, and so what was not used from that is going towards Graywell Cove design, permitting, and then part of the construction will be funded through the TA grant, and then we're also, I think, based on the current cost estimate, we're about $400,000 shy of what we need for construction, which we did apply for a grant from CCAG, a bicycle and pedestrian grant, so we're still in the running for that, fingers crossed that they will grant us funding for that project. I think we'll hear back in the next couple months.
So the state is not paying for any of this directly?
No, yeah, no. They will be contributing resources in terms of staff time to, hold meetings with the county through the design and permitting process. Also, to review and comment on the designs. So they will be allocating resources in that way, but actually, I think the county is responsible and has committed to funding the project through the end of construction, and Caltrans has graciously agreed to actually implement the improvements, which will be helpful, I think, since it is their right-of-way, and moving forward, they'll be maintaining it. It will be probably, I think it will be helpful that they're implementing it the way that they would like it, and we'll be maintaining it moving forward.
And numbers, estimates usually grow more often than they shrink.
Yep.
Currently, the estimate is for the county to spend approximately 1.5 million.
Yeah,
Is that-
I think it's around 1.25
Okay.
is the current estimate for construction. However, I know Caltrans, sometimes the cost can kind of be a little bit more depending on what process or kind of how they implement construction. But yeah, currently it's about 1.25 is our cost estimate. That's based on a preliminary design, which is about, I think they said 10% design. So, as we get closer to 100% design, things do change. So hopefully not too much.
Any more questions? Any questions in the public for Ellie?
And sorry, one more thing about Graywell Cove funding. Supervisor Horsley also and the board approved, I think it was $200,000 in Measure K funding to go towards the local match that was required for the CCAG bicycle and pedestrian grant. So that's also going towards the project as well.
State one more time what is the meaning besides the pedestrian meaning for Whale Cove? I'm a little bit confused as to what are the options it has to be.
Yeah, so for the Graywell Cove, as many of you probably have visited, the beach is on the west side of Highway 1, obviously, and the parking lot is on the east side of Highway 1. So currently there are no lights or marked crossings for people to get from the parking lot to the beach. And so the proposed improvements would add a painted crosswalk across the highway. It would also add an acceleration lane and left turn lane onto the highway, so that would help to ease vehicular traffic into and out of the parking lot. And it also, we're looking at flashing beacons, which would be activated when the pedestrian presses the button, that would be on either side of the highway. One other thing that we heard very loud and clear from Caltrans at our meeting is that in all of the work that they are doing currently, they really highly recommend, from their traffic expert, highly recommend the overhead hybrid flashing beacon, I think it is.
Hawk.
The Hawk, exactly. You'll see some on El Camino Real that goes overhead. So I believe when the pedestrian presses the button, that activates what will look more like a signal light above the traffic. And what the traffic expert was telling us is that is much more visible from a when you're approaching the crosswalk. It's much more visible than flashing lights on either side of the highway. That would be the hybrid flashing beacon. So we're going to have to work through that with them, and so I will keep you all informed as we continue those conversations and kind of figure out exactly how we'll push forward.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Supervisor Horsley mentioned the way they work, pedestrian hits the button, yellow flashing light comes on, and then the light turns red. The car must stop.
Yes, that,
After a while, and then it starts to flash red. If the pedestrian is not in the road anymore, the car can continue. But it will completely stop.
That is,
Mandatory
yeah,
driving.
that's my understanding, and that really is for the safety of the pedestrian. I think what Caltrans expressed to us is that the goal is to get the pedestrian from one side to the other as quickly as possible. And so by by stopping traffic, that creates a safer space. They also talked about kind of the hybrid flashing beacons on either side of the road as kind of, they have concerns that it does sometimes create a false sense of safety, that, it's harder for the driver to see. So, the pedestrian may feel safe because they see the lights there, but it's not as visible to the driver as something that would be overhead would be. So, that's actually something I'm looking at doing, is bringing some more information during a meeting when there's time to really look at, what the hybrid flashing beacon hawk, what it looks like, how it works, and what it would look like at Graywell Cove specifically.
That would be appreciated.
Yeah.
I'd really love to get into the efficacy of this solution, but in deference to our presenters tonight and our agenda, just one question. So it's only a painted crosswalk? I thought there was some discussion of raised pedestrian medians.
So it's a painted crosswalk, and I forgot to include, there will also be a painted median there. Unfortunately, my understanding is that in order to put a raised median there, due to the speed, the speed of the traffic in that area, the raised median would require additional widening of the road, because not only would the road would have to be wider, but also the median would have to be much longer, and there would have to be additional highway lighting to ensure that the driver is able to see that there's a raised thing in the middle of the road.
I know it's not your decision, Ellie. I just want to point out the contradiction between the speed of the road is too fast, therefore we can't put a refuge
so
for
Lisa and I
pedestrians.
reported on this meeting in great detail once before, so we probably should get on with the agenda.
I'm just trying to get the details, David. When we heard just now, there was no talk of a median. Now it's a painted median. The last I heard from you guys, there was a raised median, so I'm trying to get clear here.
The preliminary
Trying to get
design, when you look at it, you will see you will see what looks like a median painted on the roadway in the middle of the two lanes. It is a painted median. It's not a raised median, and that's what we have been talking about since outreach was done. But yeah.
This is the last thing I'm going to say, but we were also told that they might put in some sort of tactile or acoustic material in the road, some sort of little dots or rumble strips or something that would.
Yeah, I believe that is something that they require for kind of right at the crosswalk, similar to right at Surfers Beach at Coronado, where they have they call them truncated domes. It's generally they're yellow, the little kind of bumpy area to warn pedestrians that they're going to be changing, onto a roadway versus a sidewalk. But we are going to be looking at all options to create the safest crosswalk possible for pedestrians. So that includes looking at whatever additional features can be added in addition to the painted crosswalk and the median and the kind of the flashing lights as well. So, but the design is at the preliminary stage, so 10%. The details have yet to be ironed out. So we will be coming back with additional information as the design develops.
I'm just curious, why are we prioritizing crossing at a beach where it's really optional to go to, as opposed to making things safer for people in Montera and West Beach to cross the highway, where a lot of people who live on the west side of the highway need to get to the.
Can I interrupt at this point? We're getting way off the subject. This has been discussed at over the last 2 or 3 years on crossings and the prioritizing of them. And so we don't really have time just under the supervisor's report to go back over all that history. But we can,
Is it documented somewhere?
we can put it on the agenda again. There's a wealth of information on the Midcoast Community Council website, Highway 1 page, and it links to all these projects, and you can find out what they're costing, where the funding's coming from, or the comments that we've written, and how we got to where we are now. So,
Yeah, and one thing I'll just add briefly, State Parks estimates over 60,000 visitors to Graywell Cove State Beach annually. So, you know, it really, I understand there are a lot of areas of need along Highway 1, and, you know, we're really doing as much as, you know, doing our best to work with Caltrans to, you know, help to make some progress. So it doesn't happen overnight, and, you know, we can't tackle it all at once, but we really look forward to working with the community to get improvements along Highway 1, you know, in Caltrans jurisdiction as we can.
the Crossings project, there's a page on that on our website, and it explains the process we went through in 2015 and 2016 to select the alternatives the community preferred, and then there was a determination to do them in phases. And Moss Beach is, say, phase 2, Montera's phase 3, Graywell Cove came out as phase 1. But you can read more history on that there. MidcoastCommunityCouncil.org. Thank you, Ellie.
Yep, thank you.
I just wanted to say, it's great to see so many new faces here tonight, and public outreach is something we wrestle with and work really hard on here, and it's always, I'm always interested to know how you found out about the meeting. Could just raise of hands. Do you automatically receive our agenda? Okay. Did you see it on the MCC website, this meeting? Did you see it on Nextdoor? Did you hear about it from a neighbor? Do you suspect the neighbor saw it on Nextdoor? All right, let me just say, Nextdoor has been a real benefit, another way for us to reach out to the community, and we can direct people to our website so that you can be sure you get the information you need, so you don't miss a project, crossings or whatever it is. And like I say, don't count on Nextdoor or the neighbor to clue you in when there's something really important that might affect you. The Midcoast Community Council website is there to help you. We gather information, what the county's doing, government, environmental issues, and put it there so it's all in one place, and check it once in a while. See what it has to offer.
Also, it's nice to have you mailing this.
Yeah, you can see where to sign up for the automatic agenda email list. It's only 2 emails a month. Whenever we have a meeting, we send the agenda out, and you can just glance at it, and if something interests you, pay more attention. If not, at least you haven't missed something. Okay. Next item on the agenda is public comment and announcements.
Harvey?
Oh, Harvey, come on up.
I'm Harvey Rohrback. I serve on the Half Moon Bay City Council. I have a couple of updates, but before I begin, I want to give a congratulations to the website. I think it's really a well-done thing. It's clear. You can find out what you want without a lot of extra information. I use it all the time, and I highly recommend it to everybody as a place to check. I want to report on 2 items that the City Council has been working on. Homelessness and cannabis. I think there's a lot of interest in cannabis here. The City Council had a special meeting to talk about our homeless problem in Half Moon Bay, and it's clearly a problem. I wish I could report that we saw a light at the end of the tunnel, but it's a very, very difficult problem. You probably know that there's more than one encampment on Pilar Cedars Creek, and it's doing extremely serious environmental degradation. So there's this one idea that we can't continue that way. On the other hand, the county has had a lot of help input. They really want to deal with the homeless population. There's a hot team that comes out more than once a week to counsel the homeless people there. And in our negotiations with the county, they've agreed to try to overcome some of the objections that the homeless population has to leaving the coast side. The problem is that the county's resources in terms of permanent housing and in terms of shelter from the inclement weather are all over the hill. And a lot of homeless people don't want to go over the hill. And it is a problem. So the county is trying to overcome some of those objections by guaranteeing a space in a shelter over the hill, guaranteeing that homeless people will have a locker, a storage locker with their own key, where they can make sure that their things are safe, because that's one objection a lot of homeless people have to going in the shelter, that their stuff gets stolen. And there will be kennels, because a lot of homeless people really don't want to leave their animals. And the county has guaranteed that they will have accommodations over the hill. So that's one part of it. The other part of it is that probably within 90 days, we're going to have a program to evict the homeless people living in the encampments. And we'll try to do it as humanely as possible. We're going to have intensive meetings with homeless people to try to get services to them as in a one-on-one way that will help individuals. But we cannot continue to have the environmental degradation. So that's sort of the two-pronged approach. I wish I could tell you that there is a simple answer. There isn't. It's a serious problem, but we are concerned.
Has it been discussed that shelters could be provided, a shelter could be created on the coast side?
There was a request for proposals that the county put out to see if there could be temporary shelters. And there was not a single acceptable response. None of the churches had an acceptable solution. So that would be ideal if we could have a shelter on the coast. And if you have any ideas, please come forward, because we've been looking. We've been looking for land. We've been looking for people to partner with to have a either inclement weather shelter or year-round shelter. And so far, we have come up with nothing. I wish I had better news, but we don't have that.
Can I ask you a quick question, Harvey?
Sure.
The house that was bought by a tenant,
Yes.
there was some talk about maybe using that for this purpose. Have there been any further plans on that as well?
Yes, but I can't talk about it.
Ah,
Okay. It's under discussion. The other item I wanted to talk about briefly is cannabis. I just want to reiterate what I said at the last meeting. Our city attorney is drafting a draft ordinance on what the city will need to do to implement a cannabis strategy. And that will be published soon. I can't give you a date because she's very busy with other things, but it will happen soon. And we guarantee that between the time that ordinance is available to the public and the time that the city council considers a first reading, there will be at least a month in between for people to absorb what it is we're going to propose. And in that time, there will be another community outreach meeting. I don't know how many of you were at the last community outreach meeting. I wasn't there, but what I heard was only positive comments, that it really was a transparent way that the community could get their input heard. And that's what we want to do again once we have in black and white what it is we're proposing, so people can react to not the rumors that I've gotten 2 calls right now that say that Monsanto is going to buy Rocket Farms. Okay, it's that kind of rumors that we will try to quash and be straightforward as to what it is exactly we're proposing and what the community input is in response to that. And I'm looking forward to hearing the county response to cannabis on the agenda. Thank you.
Thanks, Harvey. Okay, public comment on, I don't have any speaker slip. Does anybody wish to speak on an item that's not on the agenda tonight? Have an announcement?
So I have two announcements. One is the Half Moon Bay Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee will be meeting a week from tomorrow to present the recommendations on bicycle and pedestrian improvements. So if you're interested in that, even on Midcoast, a lot of what they're talking about will be relevant, so you might want to attend that. The information's on the Half Moon Bay City website. The other is we've been talking somewhat about the Ohlone Portola Historic Trail. November 4th is the anniversary of the discovery of San Francisco Bay by the Portola expedition, and the Pacifica Historical Society, GGNRA, and a few others are sponsoring a short movie and a hike to the discovery site on November 4th. They'll be meeting at the community center November 4th at 10. And then a short movie and a display, and then they'll carpool up to the top of Fassler to hike up to the discovery site.
That it? I'd like to announce that the Mid-Peninsula Regional Open Space District is having an open house Wednesday, November 1st at 6 p.m. at Senior Co-Siders in Half Moon Bay. That's at 925 Main Street. There'll be a presentation, question and answer about Mid-Pen projects in the coastal service plan area, including La Honda, Half Moon Bay, and other coastal communities. Anybody else? Pardon?
What
Time?
6.
6 p.m.
I just wanted to piggyback on that and make sure people understand, because often this organization is referred to as MidPen, but that is different than the housing development organization that is working on the project in Moss Beach. So those are two completely separate entities. They have nothing to do with each other, but they often are both called MidPen. So please don't misunderstand that.
Yes, this is Mid-Peninsula Regional Open Space District, or MROSD, you may have heard of. Okay. Anybody else have announcements on the council? Okay, moving on. Consent agenda, we have approval of the minutes for October 11, 2017. Do I have a motion?
I move that we approve the minutes as currently constituted.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
6-0, thank you. All right, the first item on our regular agenda is a progress update on county cannabis regulations with President Andrew Berthelsen. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for welcoming me back. I'm pleased to give you an update. And I'm going to stall a little bit while Dave gets the PowerPoint going there. So when last we spoke, the board had just had another study session on this item. And county staff was beginning to do some more outreach to MCC and PMAC and our ag folks, Farm Bureau and elsewhere. And we were working on a draft ordinance that reflected kind of the feedback we'd gotten and the board discussions that had happened. And so that is now public. It's on your website. We have it on the county website as well. If you guys haven't seen it, go to the MCC website. It's posted, or I can give you a link. It's a little bit long for me to just say out loud, but I can give you a link to the county website where not only is that ordinance there, but some more outreach things we're going to try and do will also be posted. So I'm going to start with a little bit of a background and just kind of set the framework of where we are in this process. So first of all, back in 1996, Prop 215 passed, again, proposition that was passed by the voters. And that said that individuals who had a medical reason to use marijuana were allowed to grow it for themselves. And if you were a caregiver, you could grow it for people who also, again, needed it for medical purposes. There was no professionalization of it, but that was kind of the first step where for medical purposes, marijuana under state law was not completely legal. The next step was MMPA in 2004. That was passed by the legislature, and that kind of took it another step. It basically said you could have a nonprofit a cooperative, a collective, that was allowed to grow marijuana and sell it to people. And those are basically all of the dispensaries that have been in operation for, you know, the last decade plus have technically been in operation under MMPA. Kind of a liberal interpretation of it, but they've all technically been nonprofits only providing marijuana for medical purposes. A few years after MMPA passed, the county decided it ought to have an ordinance in place. And so it did outreach and it adopted an ordinance in 2009, which would have allowed collectives in the unincorporated area to grow and to operate a dispensary. No one ever got through the permitting process. So that's still on the books. But as you know, there are no collectives in the unincorporated county either on the coast side or on any of the Bay Area or the Bayside pockets. 2 years ago, MCSRA was passed by the legislature. And that said, instead of having these nonprofits grow and sell, we're going to allow for-profits to grow, only grow, to manufacture edibles and other things, or to sell things, for-profits, but only for medical purposes. That bill, again, was passed by the legislature in 2015, was supposed to go into effect January 1st of next year. So the state was suddenly going to license and regulate for-profit medical marijuana. So a whole bunch of people got really excited about that, and they put Prop 64 on the ballot last year. And that said, let's not just do this for-profit model for medical marijuana, let's do this for-profit model for adult use marijuana. And let's basically decriminalize marijuana for recreational purposes. And that was passed pretty overwhelmingly by voters last November. So the county of San Mateo and the city of Half Moon Bay and a lot of other places in the state of California decided they needed to get a handle on this. And so the Board of Supervisors kicked off its first study session less than a month later, back in December of last year. And based on that and concern about kind of this new scheme coming forward very quickly, the board passed a temporary moratorium in December 13th of 2016 that said, we're not going to allow any for-profit marijuana activities. And the temporary moratorium by law, that can only be for 45 days. So they extended it a month later. And that's our current moratorium, which is in place in the unincorporated parts of the county. And that lasts until December 12th of this year. And what that says is not just that you can't have a for-profit business. We also tried to regulate some of the personal use, and I'll get to that in a minute. So that was in January. The county kept looking at this. City started looking at this, trying to figure out what it meant. And then in June of this last year, the legislature decided, well, we shouldn't have two separate schemes for medical marijuana and for recreational marijuana that are a little different. So let's merge it all. And that's what MAUCRSA is. So just in June of this year, the new regulatory scheme, the new laws related to all this were passed by the legislature. So we're still starting to get a handle on all of this. They still don't have regulations from all the different state departments on how they're going to implement all of this. But we had another study session in July, and then we did some outreach here again. I think I was here just after that. And again, now we have a new draft ordinance which is out and available for public review. And again, we're all leading up into January 1st of next year when the state is going to start issuing permits up and down the state for-profit businesses to get into this industry. So again, I want to split our conversation into two parts. First is the non-commercial activities, and that means personal cultivation and personal use, and then the commercial activities. All these various license classes that the state is going to be offering, and which we at the local level can regulate or prohibit to a certain degree. So we go to the next one, great. So first of all, non-commercial activities. This is personal use and personal cultivation. So state law, and this was immediate when Prop 64 passed. It said you were allowed suddenly to possess marijuana up to a certain amount. You were allowed to use it as an adult if you're over 21, as long as it wasn't a prohibited place, as long as smoking wasn't prohibited, as long as you weren't within 1,000 feet of a school, daycare facility, or youth center. And originally it was you weren't supposed to have an open container in a vehicle. That's been since modified. You aren't supposed to drive under the influence either. That's been clarified a little bit. But you as an individual are allowed to grow 6 plants at your house, and you're allowed to have a small amount with you, up to 1 ounce or 8 grams of concentrate. You're allowed to drive with that, and you're allowed to give it away to a neighbor. You can't charge them for it, but you're allowed to give it away to a neighbor. That was all made legal by Prop 64. At the county and at the city level, we can't change most of that. We can't restrict that any further. The only thing we can really do is control where someone grows the 6 plants they're entitled to grow in their home. And the state law basically says it has to be shielded from public view, so it can be behind a fence, but they're allowed that on their private property. The county, in its emergency moratorium, and in the new ordinance we've proposed, went 1 step further and we said, we don't even want it in the backyard, because someone might hop the fence and grab it or something else. We want it inside. If you're going to grow 6 plants, it has to be inside. It doesn't have to be in your home. It can be if you have a greenhouse or a shed in your backyard, that's allowed. But we can't really restrict it more than that based on state law. So that's as far as we thought we could really comfortably go under state law in restricting personal cultivation. So the other big side of this is the commercial aspect. Again, all these businesses that want to be licensed by the state, for-profit businesses. And what our ordinance that's out in draft form would do now is it would permit greenhouse commercial cultivation and nursery cultivation, which means just the starts. They aren't going to be budding or smelling yet, in greenhouses. Those are the only place that we're going to allow cultivation. The county ordinance, as proposed, would prohibit indoor, so that means in an actual building cultivation, or outdoor, so we aren't going to have fields of marijuana in the unincorporated area. We would prohibit manufacturing for the time being. We'd prohibit testing, micro businesses, and dispensaries. So the county ordinance would not allow, any storefront sales in the unincorporated area, as proposed. There are 2 things that's a little more difficult for us to regulate. And the first one is transportation. There's a separate transportation license the state issues. And we don't propose citing those transportation businesses in the unincorporated area, but we're not allowed to prohibit trucks that are going from, say, the city of Half Moon Bay, from a cultivation site there. We aren't allowed to block those trucks from going up to Pacifica or somewhere else and delivering their product. So we can't really regulate the transportation through our jurisdiction. So we'd be permissive of that. The other part, which is a little bit trickier, is the delivery. And that's something which I think a lot of jurisdictions are struggling with. Even right now, under the medicinal scheme, some people are able to go on their phone and order marijuana delivered to their home or to wherever else. The state would allow that under the new scheme, but there still has to be a site for that business to be based. And we don't want to cite those businesses in the unincorporated area. It's a secure facility. We aren't ready to regulate that yet. We don't know what the state regulations are going to look like. But we think it would be very difficult and perhaps legally conflicting for us to prevent those people from driving through our jurisdiction as well. So we aren't going to be licensing them, but we also aren't going to be strictly prohibiting them in the proposed ordinance at this time. And again, on the top right, you can see there are a whole bunch of different license types the state has identified. They all have numbers and letters based on whether it's a large-scale cultivation facility, whether it's a small-scale cultivation facility, whether it's a manufacturing facility that uses solvents and chemicals, or whether it's one that doesn't use that. So those 4 license types on the right are essentially the 4 that our ordinance would allow. Type 1B, 2B, 3B, and 4. The B licenses are all the greenhouse licenses, and 4 is the nursery licenses. So again, those are the starts. And we would further restrict the type 4 to greenhouses. That's not stipulated in the type 4 at the state level, but the county would propose to do that. And there's a couple reasons for that. One is simply the security issue. For starts, odor is less an issue, but as we've talked about before, odor is certainly an issue as plants mature closer to harvest. So again, the ordinance is out. This is kind of a quick index of what's there. Again, it's an over 30-page document. We tried to be pretty robust about the hoops these folks would have to jump through in order to get a local license and then apply for a state license. Amongst other things we've talked about before are setbacks. The state minimum setback for any of these commercial operations, whether it's a dispensary or something else, is 600 feet from a school, a licensed child care facility. We've expanded that, just as we had previously expanded with our old dispensary model ordinance, to 1,000 feet. And we've added some parks and other places where we think youth might be. We've also added, which I know is of interest to some folks, a 1,000-foot setback from lands which are zoned residential. Part of the idea of allowing cultivation was that it would have the least impact to begin with versus a lot of those other license classes, because it was traditionally going to be in a more rural area that was traditionally used to agricultural activities. And technically, except for the crop value, it's a pretty traditional crop in a lot of respects. And I think state law mandates we actually treat it like an agricultural crop for a lot of ways. It labels it as such. So we said we'll have these bigger setbacks. This will be in areas which there's less of an impact on neighbors because of these additional setbacks that we've proposed. We have odor control requirements. We have operational requirements. We have security requirements. So, again, we've tried to make this as robust as possible. Based on the feedback from this committee and others, and meeting with our agricultural community, the Farm Bureau, and Ag Advisory folks, and really try and target the greenhouses where there is some kind of excess capacity right now. Some of you know I've talked about this before. We have close to a 20% vacancy rate in our greenhouses right now because of the decline in the cut flower industry. And so that's kind of what we would try to limit it to. We also have pretty strong language in there to prevent displacement. Just because this is a more valuable crop doesn't mean we want to have people growing this and not growing the things they're growing now. Right? This is supposed to kind of make up for their inability to grow those other crops. So we have a lot of requirements and protections in there. If you have questions about them, I don't want to walk through all of it, but we're going to do some more public outreach. Again, that Half Moon Bay meeting, Harvey, was great. I worked with Matthew, and that was a really good meeting. We're hoping to do some more outreach like that. Again, I'm doing the rounds again, and if you have questions, you guys have my contact information. I can answer them now or certainly get back to any of you.
Andrew?
Yeah.
Could you mention some of the protections and safeguards? Talk about lighting.
Okay.
Maybe
So,
I'm interested in that.
So we do have essentially a requirement that they shield. So greenhouses typically, the main advantage is it's natural light versus an indoor facility, right? So you're not using a lot of money on lighting costs. Typically these crops though do light up at night so that they can kind of, give the crops a little bit of steroids. They give them some extra light. So there's a concern typically that you have light pollution in areas where you have greenhouses. Some of that happens now. We've essentially, we've asked that these be screened. So you'll basically have like a kind of a tinted window so there's less light pollution than perhaps there is now for some of these greenhouses. If someone decides to apply for a permit here, that would be a requirement. And we also, as long as we're talking about lighting, the county launched Peninsula Clean Energy. I don't know if any of you are familiar with that. So we do have essentially 100% renewable requirement here too. People either need to go through that or they need to put up solar or something else to make sure that they can satisfy that requirement. We're trying to reduce the impact on the community as much as possible with a lot of these requirements.
I have a question, just a quick one about fees and taxes.
Uh-huh.
Are the monies generated by this crop earmarked for anything specific, or does it just go into the general?
So fees and taxes, as you probably know, are two different things. So fees are only allowed to cover the costs associated with the activity. So we haven't finished our fee study yet. We haven't proposed the fee that would need to be done before an ordinance is passed, which again, that hasn't been agendized yet. But the fees would be limited basically to enforcement costs and to reviewing the application and inspections and all of that thing.
Okay.
If we were to look at a tax, and this goes for the city and everyone else, typically those taxes have to go on the ballot, like other taxes. They have to go before the voters for voter approval. So that's certainly something we're looking at. If you look at the language for fees and taxes, it's pretty vague. It just basically says any applicant has to comply with whatever fees and taxes we levy at a later date.
Okay.
But the details of that would have to be worked out. Certainly our goal isn't to divert money. I don't think we're going to make a lot of money off this. We don't know what kind of activity we're going to get. But from a county perspective, even if we set aside the direct regulatory costs of inspections and security and ag and environmental health, the county has a responsibility also as a public health entity. And so there's a whole nother conversation, which I haven't gotten into here really, about what the county's responsibility is for youth education and prevention, for treatment. And I don't anticipate that whatever taxes we might impose would really cover kind of some of those cost burdens, which the county is going to see, if any city decides to go further with legalization. So I'll just throw that out there.
And wait, hold on. Andrew, could you take questions from the council first?
Absolutely.
And then we'll
I'm sorry.
open it up? Okay. Council members, do you have any questions for Andrew? Dan?
Yes, hi. So, first of all, I want to state that, I am not against commercial cultivation of cannabis. I do have strong concerns about if all of a sudden, I don't know how many thousands of square feet greenhouse we're talking about. We're talking about a lot of value in it that would enter into a rural community with people living in it and people coming to recreate and go bicycle riding on the side roads and not to have to worry about any criminal activity trying to get some of that value. So I'm certain that this has come up before. I'm wondering, what ideas, whether it's limiting permits and on a trial basis, let a little out and see what happens, and before, overnight just opening up all the greenhouses for this activity. Just basically ensuring that you're not going to drastically change the culture of our community with this decision and this new
So,
regulation.
a couple quick things. One, that's certainly a concern. I think part of what we were hearing from the ag community and why they wanted this was actually preservation of community a little bit. It was candidly, it was the concern that there were folks in the ag community who weren't able to continue farming. Particularly, down in Pescadero, we were hearing from folks who said they either needed to sell the farm or, they were going to go under, essentially. They didn't know what to do. And this was kind of a margin thing where they would be able to fill some excess capacity. Again, we have a restriction in there about not displacing. So, about not displacing existing agriculture. So, I don't think even under a scenario where every single empty square foot in the county were to apply for a license, you're going to see that much impact to the degree you're talking about. But there is a protection up till that point. In terms of criminal activity, part of the reason we were looking at greenhouses, we talked about this the last meeting, was they're inherently more secure than if you allow this type of activity outdoors. If you have a field full of marijuana, it's certainly a slightly higher risk scenario. There's certainly a greater criminal exposure than if you have it in a more secure facility. And so if you look at our security...
A thin piece of glass.
Well, again, if you look at the security provisions, we've got security cameras and other things, and there's actually a security plan you're required to submit that the sheriff's office would be reviewing. So, there's some components in there trying to address some of these issues. Honestly, I can tell you, we don't know how it's going to work out because we don't know what's going to happen to the existing, kind of black market and medical scheme. But if you can go back, or can you go one more forward? The track and trace, you see it 3 down on the right. Essentially, the track and trace part of our ordinance is reiterative of state law. And this is probably the single greatest protection against black market and illegal activity in the state of California. It's a far more robust system than other states implemented when they've legalized. And again, Washington, Oregon, and Colorado were legalizing. The track and trace program is going to be administered by our ag commissioner. And even if Half Moon Bay approves an ordinance, it would also be administered by our ag commissioner as an arm of the state. And what his job is, and his team's job is, they're actually going to individually tag, and I previously showed you guys kind of an RFID tag. They're going to tag every single plant. And then once plants are going through the harvest process and they're made into batches, those are going to be tagged. It's all going to be entered into a single electronic system, it's a computer system. It's a very similar system that we already use for other things at the state level and the local level. And essentially, they're going to be able to track all the way through the supply chain. If you go to a dispensary and you buy marijuana there or an edible product, it's going to have a tag. And they're going to be able to see, just like any other kind of food recall, where that came from. One of our original concerns for the dispensaries is that they aren't going to be testing for the first 6 months because the testing labs aren't going to be licensed yet. But eventually, all of these products, as they're gone through the supply chain, are going to be tested at multiple times at the state laboratories. So there's going to be some consistency through the supply chain. And in order for someone, I'm not going to say no one's going to try and steal, or kids aren't going to try and break in and steal. I can't tell you that. But in terms of someone coming in and trying to steal a ton of things and then thinking they can sell it to a dispensary or sell it there, that shouldn't be happening, because there's going to be this the idea is there's going to be this very regulated system throughout the supply chain. And so the track and trace program is it actually is security for us at all stages. Hopefully it kind of decreases the incentive for someone to take product thinking they'd be able to sell it legally at a later time, or be able to re-enter the supply chain.
And there was one other thing that addresses Dan's concern. There's a maximum 66,000 square feet per owner. They can have multiple licenses, but no more than 66,000 feet total.
Yeah, we have a couple of restrictions like that in there. Did you have another question, Dave, as well? Or?
I had a question. So this ordinance is going to prevent dispensaries and some other things until the end of 2018. One question that keeps coming up is where the dispensaries are going to go, since a lot of cities are prohibiting them.
Right.
Pacifica has a medical dispensary now.
Well,
certainly
Pacifica's
seems
gonna
like
go-
a dispensary on the Midcoast makes a lot of sense to me. So I was wondering what the thinking was for the past the end of 2018.
So kind of two separate questions there, if I can break in. First of all, where are the dispensaries going to be? Again, at the county, we can't control what cities do. We can work with cities. We can hope that they listen to our recommendations. But we're going to have regulatory responsibilities everywhere in the county, just like environmental health goes into restaurants anywhere in the county. But we can't control what ordinances they pass, what businesses they license. Pacifica has been far more excited about this than other parts of the county. And they are looking at multiple dispensaries. They currently have 3 medicinal dispensaries, but they're looking at maybe up to 6 that would be medicinal and adult use. They're looking at manufacturing other things. There are other cities which I think longer term might be open to that. I think short term they have the same anxiety we have about the state enforcement for dispensaries and the state testing. But short term, certainly in the Midcoast, Pacifica is nearby. The other option, and it doesn't satisfy a lot of people, I'll admit this, there are a lot of people who we're hearing from, maybe less so here, but certainly in Bayside communities, who don't want to rely on delivery. We've allowed the delivery model because, at least for medicinal users, they need to have access, they have a legal right to. And we can't prevent people from growing 6 plants at home and consuming it. It's a legal product. We can't prevent people from driving to San Francisco and buying it. We can't prevent people from driving to San Jose and buying it. But for medicinal users, they want access, and they don't want to have to rely on a product that shows up that they can't test. They want access. So I don't know if the county's going to permit dispensaries, and I don't know that eventually what those conditions would be. The Board of Supervisors, the last hearing, they were back and forth on it. There wasn't a lot of excitement for dispensaries, but there was an understanding that particularly medicinal users need access. And we've basically delayed the issue. We've said this is the one thing we feel somewhat comfortable with now from a regulatory scheme that the state is ready for. We have anxiety about how the state is going to enforce regulations on a lot of these other businesses. We're not sure our communities want a lot of these other businesses. And again, we have some very different communities in the unincorporated area. We have someone who is very gung-ho about a dispensary in Pescadero. But again, this ordinance would not allow that anytime soon. So those are things the board's going to look at. If this council and others want us to accelerate the look at that, I can take that back to the supervisors. But again, this was the piece that we felt most comfortable with now. And, short term, people are allowed to grow plants. For medicinal reasons, they've been allowed to for a while. But again, adult use, you are each allowed to grow 6 plants at your house. That's state law. I can't tell you can't do that. So even if we wanted to prevent
I can't speak for the rest of the council
yeah.
at this point. I'm personally interested in it. I'll maybe have the council put it on the agenda in the future. And I understand the delay, particularly given the testing delays that
Yeah.
are happening. I don't have a concern with that.
What are you envisioning happening? I'm just a little unclear. If these plants are grown, but there's no place to sell them, what's going to happen with it then? I mean, what's the point of growing them if you can't sell it?
Well, this is a statewide thing. We are not a microcosm.
So you would,
Wholesale.
people here
Sell
would sell
wholesale.
them to someplace.
Absolutely,
another
and
county.
I can tell you, I've been getting calls from a lot of people, and some of those calls have come from San Jose dispensaries who, they don't have room to grow them in the city of San Jose, but if there's product, I'm sure they would be willing to take it off our hands.
So we would be an exporter.
We don't need all our Brussels sprouts.
Who knows? Yeah. Well, again, we aren't going to be displacing. I want to make that clear again. The goal of this is not to displace any existing ag, and we've got protections in there, hopefully, which does that. But yeah, I think
Doesn't
with
make
anything
sense to
else. So, we talked about the supply chain. San Francisco probably won't be growing a lot of marijuana in the city boundaries. It's a lot of expensive real estate. There is some now, but that's probably going to be a lot less cultivation there. You've got areas up in Trinity and other places where they're already growing a lot. It's not going to all be consumed up there. So, it's a statewide marketplace, and the manufacturing facilities, the extraction facilities, the testing labs, they can all be in different areas, which is why there's a separate transportation class of license, because the state envisioned that this stuff's going to be transported around like any other economy, I think.
Well, I agree with you, Dave. I think we should discuss it further.
Do we have a definition? You say that with the new proposal, the personal use will be able to grow at the house, but not inside, and yes, outside only in a greenhouse?
Yeah, that's in the existing moratorium. So that's already our existing rules in the unincorporated area.
So that would stay the same?
Now would stay the same. We haven't changed the personal.
So is
stuff.
there a definition of a greenhouse? Does the county have a definition?
We do have a definition of a greenhouse. When I said greenhouse for personal use, it's a different definition though, and I probably shouldn't have said that and confused you.
Well, what is it?
It's an accessory.
What is the definition
It's an
of it?
accessory structure, and it's defined in state law. There's a BMP code section I can refer you to.
Okay,
It's defined in state law. We just referred to that.
okay.
So, does the county have any current regulations regarding use, public use of, such as no smoking 1,000 feet away from such structures or such, zones or beaches? The Midcoast is a family-friendly destination for many visitors. So, are there any regulations on beaches?
So the default with Prop 64 was anywhere that smoking tobacco was illegal, smoking marijuana or consuming marijuana would also be illegal. So the county was actually always been pretty ahead on that. I think we had one of the earliest beach bans on smoking. I remember that from back when I was before. We've got a ban. It's 50 feet from the front of a public building. We've got rules about a lot of other places where you aren't allowed to tobacco smoke. Those all automatically apply. In addition to, if you were to go back a few, oh, it's already there. You got it. Prop 64 had a default of consuming within 1,000 feet of a school, daycare center, or youth center. Now, originally, that said while they were kind of in session, and that got changed by state law, and it's at all times. So 1,000 feet from any of those facilities, you aren't supposed to be consuming at any point in time, any time of day or night.
Outside of your house, I presume.
The law's a little unclear.
It says not in a public place unless authorized by local jurisdiction.
Yeah, those are two separate things. I don't want to, yeah. The state never clarified whether the 1,000 feet is really going to be enforced in someone's home. It probably can't legally be enforced in someone's home, but it is ambiguous at best. So,
Any other council members have questions?
I have two super quick questions.
Sure.
I'm sorry, I know the public has some comments. Andrew, thank you. I was able to read the whole draft ordinance, and whether I agree or disagree, I think it's pretty tight and well thought out.
Well done, because I struggled to do it too.
Yeah. So two quick questions. I noticed a lot of discussion about, okay, we're only doing it in the existing greenhouse blueprint. If a grower wanted to do anything other than that, you know, basic language of, well, we'll check it out, we'll go through the process, we'll see about it, and there may be additional permitting for that. As just general boilerplate language that was in there. Like right now, we're just doing greenhouse. So the question I have was, there was a section on no consumption on premises. Is that to mean that there will be no consumption on premises? Is that to mean that there will never be, say, a tasting room at one of these places? Because, I mean, well, we're talking about a brewery with a tasting room, and other breweries do have tasting rooms. Or with, so is that a definitive no way, no how? Or is that, well, in this larger category of, if you want to build another structure, if you want to add on to your greenhouse, we'll go through the permitting process and look at that with you?
That's a requirement. I'd have to check whether it's on the parcel or whether it's, we have a couple definitions of site plan and parcel. And if that's referring to parcel, then, you know, you probably can't get a workaround. Certainly our intent is not to allow consumption or sales on site. That's not the intent here. This is meant for truly rural areas, for farmers to be farming, and not for, there's actually a separate micro business category, which envisions people growing, maybe doing a little bit of manufacturing and selling on site. We're not allowing that license.
Okay, the other quick question, and I know it's a difficult one, but the U.S. Attorney General has said that he's going to be more proactive going after, you know, legalized marijuana situations in various states. And I understand that by state law and now by county draft ordinance that, you know, we're allowing it here, but are there going to be any protections? What protections is the county going to provide if they're going to have an ordinance that says we approve of this here? What protections would the county provide growers who decide to go ahead and do that should federal authorities come in and want to do something?
The short answer again is no. But I can give you a slightly better answer than that, but it probably won't be much comfort. There was legislation pending this year, and I'm sorry I didn't check and see if it actually got signed or not, which would essentially make California a sanctuary state with marijuana, where we wouldn't have to turn over that information to the feds unless they issued like a subpoena and they forced us to. Otherwise, we'd keep that private. I'm sure if the feds were going to be very aggressive about it, they would force us to hand that information over. But there's certainly no liability protection. If you look at the ordinance, I believe we have a disclaimer or two in there about that. If you look at our county website, the page for this, we have a big disclaimer at the top of that. There's no protection from federal liability. In terms of the current AG, real quick on that. There are a couple protections, I think I mentioned them previously, which are protecting people the last few years from prosecution. One of them was something called the Cole Memo, which is a voluntary thing the previous Attorney General adopted, which said he wasn't going to prioritize going after medical marijuana if you weren't selling to minors, if you weren't selling across state lines, and if you weren't working basically with drug cartels. There was a similar guidance issued by the Treasury Department saying they weren't going to go after you for money laundering or anything else if you didn't do those things. If you were basically an above-the-board medical marijuana industry, they weren't going to do anything. U.S. Congress passed a law as part of the budget called the Rohrabacher-Farr Amendment, which said the Attorney General can't spend $1 of federal funds to go after legal state-sanctioned marijuana activities. And that's been in the budget pretty regularly the past few years. There are two big caveats to that. One is it's not necessarily in the next budget. That's a year-to-year thing. And it's currently in, as I understand it, the Senate version of the budget. It's not currently in the House version of the budget. So if it's not there, then the AG would have full latitude to go after, to use money to go after state-sanctioned marijuana activities, medical marijuana activities. The other caveat is even the Senate version of that bill does not protect adult use. It only protects medical. There were talks about extending it to adult use. I think the likelihood of that getting in the final budget is slim. I think the likelihood of the current Rohrabacher-Farr Amendment getting in there is much better than that. But that's my guesstimate.
Thank you, Andrew. Thanks.
Okay, I have speaker slips here for public. The first is Ken Dow. If you could come to the microphone so your comments can be captured on the camera.
So if you want to just jot this down or this code.
And Applicant Rosa
The definition of
Brody.
The microphones do not amplify, they just capture it for video, so if you want to watch it later or pass it along to a friend.
There's a seat up here if you're standing in the back.
There's 3 back here if you need a seat. Right.
There's some seats. Okay.
Well, I forgot my hearing aids and my glasses, so I don't know what the hell you guys been talking about. I'm here for brand new residents to the coast, longtime visitors from the 50s. We finally moved in here. Imagine my delight when this big open area right across the street from our new house was going to be a marijuana farm. Not very happy about that.
Where is that?
Pardon?
Where is that located?
Alto Street.
Is there a greenhouse there?
Talking about Rocket Farms?
You know where the big nursery is?
Rocket Farms.
We're across the street.
Yeah.
So they're talking about making,
Monsanto, right?
So
I don't know what it is.
Rocket Farms is in the city of Half Moon Bay.
Pardon me?
Rocket Farms is in the city of Half Moon Bay, so you
We're
would,
across the street. We're in the unincorporated area.
but you're talking about the greenhouse, right?
Yeah. Isn't that where they're
Rocket
talking about?
Farms. That's in Half Moon Bay, so that would be a different ordinance.
Yeah, the creek is the dividing line there. So you happen to be an unincorporated county,
So it doesn't make any difference what you've been saying all night.
not for that facility. Yeah, unfortunately.
Okay.
Yeah.
Although
Well,
Half Moon Bay has a similar that going
Yes.
on, almost
Yes.
Okay, well,
identical.
I'll
Yeah,
tell
but
you
you
what,
need
this
to
is a
go to
great
the-
community and it's great being here. And I wish what I was talking about had something to do with it, but thank you.
Well,
Rosa Brody?
Hi, my name is Rosa Brody. I'm a pediatrician with the County of San Mateo and a coastside resident. Along with other members of the medical community who live on the coast, I am alarmed at the speed in which local government agencies are moving towards regulation that will allow commercialization of cannabis on the coast. Today's marijuana is more than simply recreational. It is addictive and can cause serious medical, behavioral conditions such as anxiety, depression, cyclic vomiting syndrome. Even more importantly, there are negative social ramifications of the local cannabis economy, even for those who don't use a cannabis. As a parent of 2 girls, I am petrified at the thought of commercialization of marijuana. There's been studies from Colorado that have shown a marked increase in traffic accidents and crimes in localities where marijuana is commercially available. And the last thing we need is to create an environment that contributes to unsafe driving conditions and accidents. As doctors advocating for the physical and social health of our citizens, we plead with you to slow down and really study the pros and cons of allowing commercialization of marijuana in our treasured coastside communities.
Graham? Graham?
Horrible. Hard to say. Yes, it's easier when you have a speech impediment like mine. So thank you, good evening everyone, and thank you to fellow co-siders for letting me up here to talk. I just want to add my voice to the concern being expressed about moving too fast to allow growing and sale of cannabis on the coastside. Now, as a father of a sophomore at Half Moon Bay High, I always advise my son, and I'm sure you do when you're parents too, to do all the research they can before they put one pen on paper. Because what that means is they'll be well informed, they'll make good decisions, and they'll write a good essay and get good grades. Very analogous to the situation that we've got here, I feel. We owe it to the character, history, and future of our town to make sure we fully understand the decisions that we're making on a number of levels, culturally, socially, environmentally, and as parents of children, we have to make those decisions on those multiple ways. All I'm hearing about is commerce. And I don't believe that's what we're all about, is just making money for somebody else. So in other towns in the US, we've heard already, Washington, Colorado, Oregon, other places in the US, they've had this experience. We need to slow down, we need to study what's happened with them, and then make an informed decision and not rush to action. So thank you very much for hearing me out.
I'm sorry I can't do this name. Who lives on 139 Del Monte? Thank you. Come on up.
Thank you very much, Midcoast Council, for allowing the opportunity to speak. I echo Dan, Rosa, and Mr. Graham here, the concern that we can take our time. What's the rush? There's, I believe, Woodside. The city of Cupertino already adopted a moratorium of waiting 2 years and collect more information and research before altering the environment on the coast. I'm a homeowner in El Granada. I lived up the street for 20 years. And let me tell you, if I had known that I would be neighbors to marijuana cultivation farms, that wasn't part of the thought process. I thought I was moving in a place where tourists come over to pick pumpkins and buy Brussels sprouts and buy flowers. It completely changed the character of the city. And we have, the coast is not, we have our problems. And one of the problems that Andrew said he couldn't really address was the traffic. And that is a big concern, and traffic has been heavily congested in the past few years. And just last week, I want you guys to know that the traffic, the school bus, it got so bad that the vice principal from the high school actually boarded the bus at Montera to see how long it would take a student to get to the high school. And it took about 55 minutes from Montera to get to the granola shop. And then the kids still have to walk up the high school. And then if you count in the time that he has to walk from home to catch the bus and wait for the bus, it's an hour and a half for him to go that 7 miles. And so do we really need to rush into this and add even more congestion to the traffic, something that Andrew said he has absolutely no control of? And the county is made aware of this for many years, and I'm sure you heard us belly aching, but didn't get us anywhere. Anyway, I have a daughter at the high school also, so I'm worried about the additional crimes, her exposure to more people coming over here, and with the marijuana, it attracts a different crowd. It's not a family scene that the marijuana attracts. So thank you very much for listening.
Wendy, does Malchi?
Thank you for letting us speak. I've been a long-term resident of Half Moon Bay. I raised my children here. And one thing I'm very proud of is the family-friendly nature of Half Moon Bay. And even now my kids are grown, I just love to go to the beach and see the kids and the families enjoying themselves. And I think that's a big draw for our city. And I don't think commercial cannabis cultivation fits with the image of our city. I have many concerns. One especially is the impact on our youth. My son went to Half Moon Bay High. There's already plenty of pot, believe me. And do we really need to give them the message by allowing this, that yes, this is a great thing for our children? I don't think so. I'm worried about the water consumption. I didn't hear in any of our studies what impact that will have on Half Moon Bay, but that's a very big concern. And also the crime, and lastly, the odor nuisance. I happen to live in Frenchman's Creek, so I'm very close. I'm within that 1,000 feet buffer from Rocket Farm. And I know the light pollution, there will be smell, and I'm worried about who it's going to attract close to my neighborhood. So please listen to us. What I'm in favor of is a moratorium for at least 2 to 3 years, such as other cities have done. I know Cupertino and Woodside and others. And that will give you time to study the long-term impact of what you're proposing for our city. And they're just now starting to have very scientific research reports being released on the impact of this type of activity in Colorado and other cities. And we should not be the first ones to go through this. We need to learn from others and then really do this deliberately and carefully. The other thing that I know, I don't know if I've heard anyone talk about, but I've done some studying on my own, and there's a real estate impact to this too. If you live within a mile from a commercial pot grow operation, you can expect, and this is one figure I heard, 8% decrease in your property value. That's not, something that I'm in favor of, and it's going to impact me. It's going to impact the neighbors to our north that have no voice here apparently, but we're all going to be in this boat together. So please, let's slow down. I hope we talk about moratorium, not ordinance. Thank you very much.
I just want to underscore that, so Frenchman's Creek is in the city of Half Moon Bay. The city line is at Murata Road and Alto. If you're north of Murata, Alto, you're in an unincorporated county. If you're south of there, you need to talk to Half Moon Bay City Council. They will have their own ordinance. There's something else. No, I've forgotten. Never mind. Go along. Ann Morin.
Good evening. I've spent, as a former attorney, weeks studying the impact of this issue on our community, and I'll be happy to provide the council with the 7-page memo I drafted that was submitted for the record to the City Council of Half Moon Bay. We, on the coast side, are an integrated community, and many of the issues raised by my fellow neighbors and friends here tonight are relevant to potential marijuana cultivation along Highway 92, in greenhouses on the Midcoast, and in Pescadero. One of the speakers talked about having a pot tasting. That wasn't just a joke. You look online, pot tastings, cannabis festivals. Creating the industry on the coast is basically going to normalize it, just like the wine industry is normalized. What kind of message does this send to our future generations? I'd like to read a statement that was drafted by the Half Moon Bay High School Health and Wellness Committee and delivered at the last City Council meeting. And I will submit a copy of the letter for the record here. Basically, this Health and Wellness Committee was organized in 2015 to address issues important to the students' health. The superintendent, Jane Euster, John Nazar, the principal, Robert Pappalardo, school board vice president, and many other eminent therapists, pediatricians, teachers, counselors, and members of the recovery community in Half Moon Bay have served on this committee. Early this month, the committee unanimously, 25 of them, voted to request Half Moon Bay City Council to impose a moratorium on the granting of any licensing for the commercial cultivation, sale, or manufacture of cannabis products in the city of Half Moon Bay. I've been requested, because Rick Southern, who is behind this effort, couldn't be here tonight, to extend this request for a moratorium to the county. And some of us will be meeting with Don Horsley as Chief of Staff tomorrow. And I would also request that this wonderful council that does so many great things for the coast, who works so hard to ensure the quality of life for this beautiful area, really consider strongly recommending to the Board of Supervisors to prolong the current moratorium for at least 3 years, to allow all the health, welfare, traffic, safety, and community culture ramifications of this new industry to be carefully studied by an independent consultant and to work closely with Half Moon Bay so that we as the coast side have an integrated ordinance, an integrated set of regulations, instead of something here, something there. And I only shudder to think of Highway 92 becoming the cannabis corridor. I don't think anyone wants to see that here in this room. And we, again, I'm just going on the record to ask you to consider it, and I will be happy to share my research with you. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Jim Kupak, and I'll be brief because a lot of the comments have been made. So I too support the moratorium. In fact, I just wanted to add a comment. There's an online petition going on about moratorium. I've signed it, and if others are interested, they could vote for or against. But it's been, as far as I can see, overwhelmingly in favor of placing a moratorium. And this was on the Nextdoor website. At least that's, no, it might not have been on the Nextdoor website, but that's where I first saw it. So I'd encourage everybody to at least look at that. Secondly, I'd encourage the council to really take a public consensus on any legislation that would be passed, put it out to a vote. Just don't do it, because I think that would be a tragic mistake to create a regulation that may have a huge impact on the community without getting officially feedback from the vote. Maybe electronic is good enough, but without having a formal feedback, I think you will find that we'll do the wrong thing. And then thirdly, I had my major concern is on the housing values from the growing commercial industrialization. My daughter, just to give a point of information, used to live up in Humboldt County, where they had indoor growing going on, and it caused a very bad odor in the neighborhoods, as you say, within to about a mile. There was, particularly at harvest time, skunk odor throughout the neighborhoods. Housing values fell in that area. Little kids would go to school smelling like dope. You know, it's just not pleasant. So if you go look at a lot of the articles that are online, you'll find that Aspen, Colorado has been impacted greatly. Housing values from the odor, and real estate agents there have to indicate on real estate forms that you are within 1 mile. So my second point is that if there is regulations going forward for industrialization, if you have a 1 mile border, that way it will not have a commercial impact on the surrounding housing values. So out in Pescadero, perhaps, then a mile away might be Half Moon Bay would be okay if Pescadero wanted it, but I would not say anything, the 600 feet, 1,000 feet, really is very short in terms of the commercial impact on the odor. So those are really my points. And really I had a question on the odor. You said there were some odor rolls in there, but at least from what I could find out, I didn't hear about them, so could you?
Yeah, I handed my copy over a second ago. Let me see if I can find it real quick.
So thank you, that's my final comment.
Go ahead. I was hoping I'd have a minute to find it.
Well, I have just a question for the audience. Could I ask the
Hold on.
audience a question?
Is there anybody else in the public who wishes to speak on this item?
You know, I didn't get a form. I'd say something.
Just please state your name for the secretary.
Glenn Mitchell. I live in Moss Beach currently. I have numerous concerns, but just to keep it very, very brief, one of the things that concerns me is I hear the statements like, we don't know, for sure. And so I am fully in support of a moratorium until we do have a better idea of what's going on. I feel like they're making us the guinea pigs. Like, we'll find out what happens, and maybe it'll be good, maybe it'll be bad. let's not wait, or let's wait and find out that it would be good. Let's get some facts that show that. You know, taking plants, I'm not a criminal, but that just boggles my mind that you could think that a criminal is not going to go in and get a plant and rip the tag off. You know, so I mean, I appreciate all the research, but some of it just doesn't sound quite right, doesn't add up. I am a real estate broker, so I'm curious about real estate values. Colorado, the prices there for a home within, I saw half a mile, are sold at a discount compared to homes that are similar, but just right outside of that. Here, we've got people, the man here that's across the river. I think we're in a small enough community that even though we have Half Moon Bay is the city, but we also have the unincorporated areas, we've got to work together as neighbors.
Yes.
And so this guy, sorry, point you out, you know, you come in and it's like they're not going to help you because you're on the other side of the river. But we need people like you guys, and I have to admit, I don't know the legal system, but we need bigger voices than just us individually saying, well, we're on the other side of the river, what can we do about it? So I really hope that you guys can say, hey, we want more time. Hey, Half Moon Bay, let's work on this together, not across the river type issues. 92, we all use 92. It seems like it makes sense that we've got to come together and have more voice and go to the Half Moon Bay meetings, I guess. But then bigger people, and I point to you guys because I don't know who the bigger people are, but bigger government people come in and help us out and be our voice. So that's my
So, just a second, Andrew. The Midcoast Community Council is advisory to the County Board of Supervisors. So we're not decision makers. Your government, your people in the unincorporated area, your government is the Board of Supervisors. And that's who Andrew's here on behalf of today. So you can answer the question about odor. I was intrigued to read that in the draft ordinance. It sounded like you had a number of them.
Yeah, odor was certainly a concern we had. And again, that was one of the big reasons, that and security, why outdoor cultivation was off the table from the get-go, I think. So there are two areas, and if you don't have a copy, which I'm assuming folks don't have in front of them.
It's on the website.
It is on the website, and again, it's on our website at the county as well. There are two places. One is, under the application process, we require submittal of odor prevention and ventilation measures. So they have to submit a plan prior to approval of what they're going to do to try and mitigate odor issues. There's also an operational requirement for ventilation, and it says they should be equipped with odor control filtration and ventilation systems to control odors and mold. No operable windows or exhaust vents shall be located at any building facade that abuts a residential use or zone, although again, we also have the 1,000-foot setback.
Abut meaning 1,000 feet? Or
no, abut basically,
or next to farm?
yeah, but, and we also have the 1,000, so it's really kind of the orientation. Because that's an operational requirement, again, this is not, first of all, let me be clear, this is not a land use or zoning ordinance. This is a business license ordinance. So, just because we allow someone to grow in a greenhouse, and I don't want to point at them out because that's going to get people out, but just because we allow someone to grow in a greenhouse doesn't mean that's like rezoning, that that's always a permitted use. This is a business license, and they have to apply for it every year. So, if they fail to meet the operational requirements, if there are odor problems in violation of their submitted plan and in violation of the operational requirements, their license will be suspended. There are provisions in here over that, and they probably won't get a license the next year. So, it's very different than I think if you allow a plant or something to be built, and then that's always in the community. Obviously, people will be investing in these, and they probably don't want to do this for a year at a time, but that's really just more of an incentive for them to comply with not just the application plans, but the operational requirements we put in the ordinance. But odor was absolutely a concern, and if it isn't working, it isn't working. Again, this is a kind of a pilot for us. And to your point about being cautious and not rushing this, candidly, we aren't rushing into dispensaries or manufacturing or a lot of other things, and we're hearing from folks who want us to license all those too. So I think the supervisor's view was, and folks can disagree, but the supervisor's view was this was a measured approach to do this for a year, to take another year to look at those other activities and what the state was going to do. And this was an area where we actually felt pretty comfortable about our ability to enforce this, and to make sure that there wasn't a big impact. And because of the setbacks, at least in the county, greenhouses and this activity wouldn't be near homes. Again, we had maps before, and I'm going to go to the map temporarily, to show the 1,000-foot setback around schools and childcare facilities. So if you look at like Granada School District, I mean, 1,000 foot was pretty big around that. If you extend that to residential zones, there's a buffer around a lot more. The other big thing we talked about previously is the county's greenhouses are not on the Midcoast. There are some on 92. There are both city and county greenhouses along 92. But the bulk of the city's or the county's greenhouses, they're not on the Midcoast. I mean, you probably all drive up and down one far more often than I do, and you aren't going to see a lot of greenhouses on this section. There are a lot down in Pescadero, and we have quite a few. We have some up near San Bruno Mountain.
Outside of Ocean County, across on the.
That's in Half Moon Bay.
No, it's on the other side.
So there's some on both.
Some are out.
There's some on both.
But the majority of those are outside of Half Moon Bay. But you're right, it goes right in between.
It goes right in between.
So both ordinances would cover it, although the majority would be the county.
So again, we kind of gone over this, and obviously we want to work with the city, and I know the city wants to work with the county, but we can't control what their setbacks and rules are. And I'm hoping, I didn't want to show the bad maps, which only showed the 1,000-foot around this. Planning is going to do 1,000-foot maps around schools and parks and the residential zones. And that may clarify down your Ocean Colony as well, what the 1,000 feet around that buffer looks like.
When will the map be available? We can post it with the ordinance.
I will absolutely get them to you. They'll be on our site as well. I've asked planning to do them. I don't know how long it takes them to run it through the GIS.
Where on your site would people find it?
I can give you the link, the URL, if folks haven't had it already. We have a page for these announcements.
See, that's what we couldn't find, and thank you for sending it to us.
Absolutely.
It is on the MCC website, and anything else you send me, we'll also put there.
Let me read the URL really slowly for anyone, and I will make sure to email it as well to anyone who's interested, in case for whatever reason typing it you get a typo wrong. The main county manager's office website is cmo.smc,
MC or NC?
M, San Mateo County, SMC Gov, all run together, .org, O-R-G. That's cmo.smcgov.org. If you go there, you can search for it and link to it, but I'll give you the direct URL anyways. It's /cannabis, CANNABIS, or
I'll put it up on the screen in just a second too.
- ordinance, ORDINANCE. Ordinance. And we'll have more meeting materials, we'll have more maps. This is kind of the first presentation we've done since the draft language came out. So I took a good solid page of notes here, and I'm sure Ellie took some as well. So Supervisor Horsley obviously has the bulk of the coast. This is an ordinance that would apply countywide. There are two other supervisors who are working on the subcommittee who I probably work with more directly on this. And those are Supervisor Pine and Supervisor Groom. Here's the page. And Supervisor Pine and Groom, and they are far more intricately aware of all of these conditions and requirements we put in here. So if stuff doesn't go far enough, or suggestions, or if folks really want to push for an extension of the moratorium, those are all arguments and things I'm going to take back, and I'm sure will be taken back to Supervisor Horsley's office as well. Again, we've had a number of public meetings on this, and there will be several more coming up. So you are welcome to any and all.
Will this be going to the Planning Commission? or just the Board of Supervisors?
It probably won't go to the planning commission because it's not a zoning ordinance.
All right, so the environmental document is out for review up until, what is it, November 17th or something like that?
That's how long the state has to comment on it, yeah.
Okay, and then there'll be a hearing at the.
Yeah.
Board
If
of
you
Supervisors.
can you go down, Dave? There should be some more. Keep going down. For some reason, it's not loading. There is another calendar thing that should be loading, but.
All
I
right,
didn't
so
see it the
for-
last time I looked at it either.
Okay.
So for people who want to it's a negative declaration, secret document for this draft ordinance. And if people want to, it's open for public comment until November 17th, and you send your comments to, or wait for this.
Yeah, no, you can send them directly to the planning department. The planner on this is Mike Schaller.
All right.
And his contact information, if you look on this page, you've got the draft ordinance, which is just the ordinance itself, which is 36 pages or so. And then you have the complete environmental document, and that actually has both the neg deck and the ordinance, because the ordinance has to be an attachment since it's an environmental review of that. So that second PDF there is, it's got a lot of Mike Schaller's work, and his information, I believe, is on there as well. There's also a hard copy available, as there always is for these, at the county center. But we've got it up here for folks too.
Right, that's the document we have posted on our website for tonight's meeting. And so his contact information is there. So you want to go through that draft ordinance and with a fine-tooth comb and put your comments together and send them to the planner. And then that would be a step you could take now. And so are you going to go to PMAC?
Yes, I'm going to PMAC next month. Their next meeting. We're going to Ag Advisory and Farm Bureau. We also planned another Bayside meeting, another Coastside meeting in Half Moon Bay. It's not for Half Moon Bay, I want to make that clear. But Ted Adcock is obviously a better venue for folks, so we're working on a meeting there in November. So again, I will call ISD in the morning because the calendar was up there earlier and I don't know why it's not loading. I can check and see if it's loading on my phone. But there are other meetings, and we're still planning some more outreach. So, and again, we're available. So,
Thank you.
I'm happy to come back to,
It looks like we have some follow-up questions here.
Absolutely. Or I can follow up one-on-one. I don't know what else you guys have.
Shout it out. Is there something quick?
Yeah, I wanted, the draft ordinance you're talking about is a draft ordinance for Midcoast.
It's for the
area.
entire unincorporated
So
county.
that includes 92 as well as Barrow.
Correct. And San Bruno Mountain and North Fair Oaks. And we have got a million
And
other.
it's documented in there what it includes.
Correct. Well, it's the unincorporated county. Yeah.
Just so I understand, so that's what that ordinance covers, but currently Half Moon Bay has an ordinance which prohibits this type of activity, am I correct?
Right.
So if your ordinance gets put through, then our council would vote to
No. So
adopt it? Or
county
how
and
is
city
that?
are completely separate
Okay.
with regards to this. The city and the county each have our own moratoriums in place, I think.
Well, the city doesn't have a moratorium
Okay.
because they just have a prohibition.
City has a prohibition in place. The county has the moratorium in place. I went through that earlier. We adopted that back in December, and then January we extended it. If the county adopts an ordinance, it's only for the unincorporated areas. If the city adopts an ordinance, it is only for the city of Half Moon Bay. The city of Pacifica already adopted one. It is only for the city of Pacifica. If we adopt something different, we do not override the city of Pacifica. There's completely separate.
So the work you're doing is not being utilized by the city council?
No, I think there's been a lot of research and dialogue. We're struggling with the same issues at the state level. But again, they have different constituents in different communities, and the board has its own priorities too. So there are different electeds for different areas. It's not, the board is not above the city on these issues.
It seems to me that from my last meeting, when I went to the city council meeting, that they're talking about putting this one through before the end of the year. Is that what you're hoping to do with the county?
So the reason that there's some rush for some folks is twofold. One is, if they want to license businesses, The state is going to start issuing state licenses January 1st. So you want to have something in place before then, either way, really. Because the previous default was if you didn't have anything at the local level, the state would issue a license anyways. That was the previous rule. So that's why we all rushed out and adopted prohibitions or moratoriums. Because if we didn't do that, we were afraid the state was going to just start issuing licenses. So that's why we have the moratorium. So our moratorium, we could only do a temporary one, and then we could do an extension of it. So we did an extension for 1 year, which was the max we could do it. So that expires December 12th. So we either need to extend it again or modify it. And this ordinance is, yes, it's a legalization, but again, it would continue the prohibition on the bulk of commercial activities. It would continue to prohibit dispensaries, it would continue to prohibit manufacturing, testing, indoor, outdoor cultivation. The only thing that would essentially be rolled back from the moratorium would be greenhouse cultivation. Yeah, absolutely.
You said there was a rush to do it.
Yes.
But now there's not a rush to do it? Or
There's conflicting information from the state. Prop 64, again, the default was if we didn't have anything, the state could issue a license because it was written by marijuana advocates. So they wanted to be able to have the state issue licenses if we didn't get around to doing anything.
I see.
The state has been a little more patient with us and wanting us to adopt ordinances to the local level and not wanting to approve things and have communities upset about it. But that is technically what was in Prop 64. So that's why we all have the moratoriums or prohibitions and why people are still rushing. But there's uncertainty about what will happen, January 1st and 2nd. There's some indication that the state will issue temporary licenses without fully vetting applicants. So that's why we want to be really thorough too. So the state hasn't adopted all the regulations yet. So that's why we want to have something in place in lieu of, the state potentially issuing licenses.
I just want to make sure that Half Moon Bay is protected, because we do have an ordinance which permits it.
They have-
So the state can do whatever they want, but they can't allow it, or we can't allow it in Half Moon Bay.
I believe the city of Half Moon Bay has a prohibition, which is
Currently, it
continuing.
has a prohibition,
Yeah.
Yes.
but we are going to be considering a draft ordinance in the reasonably near future. And we are going to have public input available for at least a month between the publication of the draft ordinance and the city council decision. Is that okay?
One thing I want
Well,
to say,
if, none of this that you're saying here is captured on the the audio. So if Harvey, if you have any real information to give out, could you come up? That's okay.
I just wanted, last thing I want to say is that, I didn't learn about this until late in the game, and when I started Googling it, and I'm looking at, various newspaper publications, especially some of the San Mateo publications, we have our mayor saying that, Half Moon Bay is in favor of it, like we are all, come together and this is a great thing. Well, I'm telling you that that is not true, and it really irritates me to see that in print. Maybe some people voted for 64, but they did not vote for cannabis commercialized growing operations next to their house.
But the city council is moving quickly to pass the regulation.
Okay, this,
Lisa, can I ask one question relevant to county? Okay.
you need to come to the microphone.
Microphone.
Please, people.
Andrew, my question is whether the Board of Supervisors has considered submitting this cannabis cultivation ordinance to a vote by the county voters.
I don't think that specific proposal was brought up at either any of the previous study sessions on the issue. I can tell you there was a suggestion at the last PMAC meeting I went to from folks who, again, wanted dispensaries and things in that community who were upset that we weren't looking at those things, who wanted us to put a referendum on allowing all commercial activities. So that's the only feedback I've heard about a referendum, and I think that's a very different referendum than what you would be asking for.
I think so.
So, again, there's a huge, not that that's the reason why not to, but there would be a cost to putting it on the ballot. There's a time to that. And I think you know, candidly, from some people's perspective, and I understand it's different voting for Prop 64 versus seeing something in your community, but from a certain perspective, people see the public vote as a reflection of public input. And so if there is other public input, these are the opportunities to voice it. And thank you, MCC, for welcoming me back, and I'm happy to come back anytime again.
But the comment on that is like, we all use gasoline,
All right,
but we wouldn't want to put a refinery in our backyard. I mean, it's not what you say, that, okay.
Can I call the meeting to order, please? Okay, we had public comment, and now it's time for the council discussion. Dave?
So I wanted to say, I looked at the precincts on the Midcoast and Half Moon Bay, and well over 2/3 of those voted for this. I'm sure some people voted for it not understanding that that included cultivation, but I think there was enough publicity around this that most people understood cultivation as part of it. And remember, wait, you guys have had your chance. You guys have had your chance. Let me talk, please. So you cannot stop people growing it in their own homes. You are going to have the smell of marijuana near your homes no matter what. I want to respond briefly to the request for a mile between the grow areas and a residential area. I believe that eliminates about 98% of the county ag areas. Very few of the ag parcels in the county are larger than a square mile. And there are homes on most of them. So you're essentially asking for it to be outlawed, and I suspect that would be struck down in court over time. Personally, I'm in favor of anything that keeps the farmers going. We have very few large corporate farms anywhere in this area. Rocket Farms is the largest quote-unquote corporation we've got because they have a lot of areas down in Santa Cruz County. They're not large corporate. We do need to keep the farmers. This is one way to keep them going. I fully support this. So I'm disappointed we don't have more, but I think this is a good start.
Chris?
So last time Andrew was here, I expressed that I'm dubious about it for a number of reasons. So when the draft ordinance came out, I went through with a fine-tooth comb, really like wanting to find, okay, here's a hole, you know, wide open space. Okay, look, here's another huge hole. So again, aside from my personal feeling about whether it should be or should not be allowed, to me, looking with a dubious eye, the ordinance is pretty tight. I had many questions that I wanted answered by that ordinance, or, you know, well, they're going to try to do this, or they're going to try to do that. I really feel that the ordinance is very tight. So per the agenda item on discussion on the draft ordinance, this is what John Kerry's statement here, I would support the ordinance. However, I may not particularly support the idea. And so I am curious about what the MCC would have if we had an agenda item on this. Dave had mentioned possibly bringing it as an agenda item. I would be in favor of that. But I highly recommend to everybody, especially if you're dubious, as I am still, for a number of reasons, to read the ordinance and the staff report that's on the MCC website. Have your list of objections. Now, this ordinance will not address aesthetics, you know, such as many people have brought up, the family nature of the coast side and those concerns. Okay, that is not part of this ordinance. But the legal restrictions and requirements spelled out in this ordinance, again, I feel are very strong. I've read a number of these ordinances now and have come away with many more questions and doubts on other ordinances. So, you know, I know that probably doesn't help much, but those are my comments on the ordinance itself.
Quick question for Andrew. The maximum square footage of a permit would be 66,000 square feet?
No. So a single permit the maximum single permit can be, if they were to get the maximum size of the state, is 22,000. But you theoretically can get, from the state perspective, multiple permits. The state doesn't have a cap on the number of permits you can get. So again, we had up earlier, the largest one is up to 22,000. Then there's a 5 to 10, and there's 5 and below. Those are the different classes. 1B, 2B, 3B, those are the sizes. The state doesn't have a cap on the number of permits a certain applicant can have. We put a cap in. It's not a single license, but it's not unlimited licenses. So we thought it was reflective of Prop 64's intent to a certain degree to prohibit large-scale cultivation. But there's not a state prohibition on that.
And that
So,
cap is?
It is 66,000 square feet.
Okay. And I would imagine that, business is going to have no problem coming up with the equipment, the ventilation equipment, to start the business. But to filter the air of, I don't know how tall, that's a lot of volume of air.
Yeah.
Now, how do they filter it? They use carbon filters, I think. So we're talking about an annual maintenance cost that's going to cut into the operations that essentially someone's going to have a judgment call as to whether or not we're going to strictly enforce this. Now, my guess is you're going to have a lot of phone calls in the Half Moon Bay area, okay? But the greenhouses that are way up in the mountains, no one's going to call. No one's going to complain. So therefore, these guys up there are going to have an unfair advantage, right? They're not going to have to buy these expensive filters on an annual basis, and then the ones in the so now we've got friction. We've got a situation of, okay, what, does it really smell that bad? And that I have a problem with because there's certain things are enforced, certain things are not. There's noise ordinances, they're not enforced.
I'd point out one difference, and I agree with you that a lot of ordinances are complaint-based. Code compliance can't respond to everything, but it is complaint-driven for noise and for a lot of other things. And to a certain degree, the odor component of this will probably be complaint-driven as well. You're probably right. But we also have mandatory inspection issues in here. And the idea that someone wouldn't bother with the ventilation system is invalidated by the fact that we have it as an application and an operational requirement. So if they have to have it in order to get a license, and we're going to be regularly inspecting it, it's a little bit more robust enforcement than typical code compliance would be, because we've built that in, and that would be built into like kind of a regular thing as well. So odor is hard to identify. I will give you that, both source and intensity versus noise, which we have technically an easier job of enforcing. But the idea is, if we have a robust requirement in about the system that they install, if we keep these enclosed and not outdoor, that the worst case scenario will be less, and ideally, again, we have that regular enforcement, not just a complaint-driven system.
Do you have carbon filters in there, or is it just some filtration?
I don't believe we specified carbon, but there are multiple, types of filtration systems. It's possible if, it's clear that a certain type of filtration system doesn't work, that we won't allow those anymore. That those will no longer be in compliance. So, it's like anything else. It's going to require enforcement by the county. If someone's not in compliance, they won't be able to continue operating.
Have you actually been to a grow operation that has these kinds of filters to see what it's like?
Yeah, we've had a number of staff people, researching this. You guys mentioned other states. Our assistant county manager, who I work with very closely on this, actually just got back from Denver and trying to get a better handle on it and kind of what some of the issues that we'll be seeing. And so yeah, it's something we're researching. And our ag commissioners, visited facilities. I know Supervisor Groom has. I'm not sure about Supervisor Pine or Supervisor Horsley, although I know Supervisor Horsley's been to grow sites before.
It's not hard to
Yeah.
and if it's not early in the evening, but I understand that
Yeah.
the odor is the strongest. And
Well-
you can go and randomly say, oh yeah, this is fine.
Yeah, some of the sites are actually continually harvesting, and so there's kind of a continued odor problem.
But how big are they?
Oh, this
It
isn't
varies,
work, well, this isn't, we had public comment, please.
Sorry.
When you speak from there, the camera doesn't pick it up. It's the council's turn to talk now, if we can continue. Dan, were you finished?
Just one last quick question. Does anybody know if the propane facility in Moss Beach has their business license renewed every year?
No, they do not require.
Can we not complicate this any more?
Well, I just,
No, they have a use permit.
it kind of, okay.
And actually, this is a helpful clarification, if I may. The county does not issue business licenses for most things. A lot of cities do. Every business that operates needs to have a business license. The county does not do that. The county currently requires business licenses for massage parlors, for card rooms, for fairs and festivals, and this would be one of the only other things we're requiring a business license for. So it's different, again, than a use permit or something that's land-based. And that's because we can pull it, we can suspend it, and that makes enforcement easier.
Just so the room understands, the reason I asked that question is there was a lot of odor problems at the propane, and it just went on and on and on for a number of years. Anyway, it looks like the county's doing some things with that, but that's
Different
why I
issue.
asked the question.
Okay, Claire?
You probably won't like this, but I think this is actually a way of maintaining the culture of the coast side. It's making the agricultural community solvent and preventing the breakup of farms and increase in development. I think if this ordinance is carried out the way it's written, which is, I agree, is pretty tight, there aren't any consumer activities involved with it. I don't think there's going to be a lot of people coming out here just to know that there's greenhouses here, if there's no accessibility to buying or using marijuana that doesn't exist already. So I think in the interest of keeping the character of the coast side, this is definitely worth considering.
Brandon, you have anything?
You know, so right now I do know that Santa Cruz County is really big on cannabis and marijuana. When you go down to Santa Cruz, you could you know, people smoke it publicly. It's a cultural there. The idea of the coast side where people come for the pumpkin festival, people go to the beach, people eating seafood, you know, becoming more of a you know, more of a marijuana haven is really ridiculous. It's I mean, it baffles me that you know, it could change to what's happening in Santa Cruz. Now, I think that we should consider not just consider the greenhouse you know, regulations, but we should also consider smoking regulations and other use of marijuana, such as you know chewing it or whatever in public. I mean, private, it would be a much different case, but in public use, such as beaches, I mean, marijuana, you know, smoking is very, very, very odorous. I mean, especially in public, it could drive away tourism, you know, and so this, the Midcoast economy is, relies both on agriculture and tourism. I understand that there is a little decline in agricultural, but I believe that we could find other sorts of crops to make up for the shortfall in agriculture. I believe that we can discuss that would be a different discussion with the farmers and what they can utilize and what they can grow in the coast side, and what could also bring in tourism as well. So that is my take on this.
So there was one other thing I wanted to mention. We have 2 breweries and a distillery here on the Midcoast. They all have large amounts of alcohol on site. None of them had been broken into, had anything stolen, and they're going to have way less security than this ordinance is going to require. They also have had very, very few smell problems, and if you have ever brewed your own beer or distilled anything of your own, you know that they can be extremely smelly. So the filtering does work. And I think with the yearly inspections, we stand a pretty good chance. We do have a few greenhouses here on the Midcoast. They're back in the valleys. Most people probably aren't even aware they're there.
Well, my thoughts on this are, I was very intrigued to read about the odor control because they're proposing a large brewery next to my neighborhood, and I was concerned about the odor from that, so I hope that they can also control the odor from that brewery. I also support our coastal agriculture, and I know that the greenhouses have been hurting. Badly hurting, and I think the situation on 92 is a perfect example of that. They can't make money farming, so we have agritourism, and that is the traffic nightmare that we suffer with. And these cannabis cultivating greenhouses are not going to have any visitors there. They're going to have workers, and that's it. And they're supposed to, you're not supposed to be able to see the cannabis inside or anything. They got all these regulations in the ordinance, and so just imagine for a moment that the greenhouses on 92 are no longer pony rides and people walking back and forth across the road, and all the retail greenhouse row they got there now, that it's just a quiet wholesale cannabis thing, nothing to see here, drive on by, and much improved. So just try that on for size is what I'm saying. I will post Andrew's slide presentation on our website as well, if you want to refer to that. And does the council have an opinion now about whether we should have this on an agenda and comment formally, or what? Any thoughts on that?
Well, the expected desired outcome of such an agenda item would be, do we support the ordinance or do we support the idea?
No, it doesn't have to be that at all. It can be just say, it could be, well, we think you should tweak this or that, or
in
just
the
as
ordinance?
we always do, yeah.
Or what should we add to the ordinance?
Well, I'm not, Andrew and whoever you're working with have been working on this for at least a year, right? It certainly shows the work that's gone into it, the thought that's gone into it. I wouldn't propose to add anything to it.
Do any of you have thoughts on the housing value problem that address?
I think that if this in my opinion, if this were to cause a decrease in housing value, I can only think it's because if there is indeed an odor problem, and that has to be dealt with. If there is a neighborhood, like I say, this is a business license. If it's not working, it can be revoked if it's too close to housing. You know, this can be adjusted.
Well, I have a question regarding that. To Andrew, or real estate person, really. So let's just say there's this cannabis operation growing. What if you're buying or selling a house, would you be required to actually sign an acknowledgement or have a disclosure of?
Yes, within in two areas, within half a mile or a mile, depending on which place. If you go to Aspen, it's within a mile.
Well, here.
Oh, say here.
I don't believe that's a mandatory component, but I can't speak to, what liability a seller might have or what disclosures they want to do.
And and from what I hear,
I will also say, and there is, I'm not an expert to speak to real estate values, but there have been fluctuations on both sides.
All right, can I just interrupt here?
Not for residential, but
Thank you. It's running late. We got another important agenda item. We're going to post the upcoming meetings. The summit won't be far away. There'll be one at Ted Adcock, there'll be one in Pescadero, that you can study this some more, talk among yourselves, come again to these other meetings. Andrew will be there and continue this at that time, okay? I think we'll just be done with this item.
And I would suggest that if we are going to put anything further on the agenda, that be determined when the agenda is made up, not right now.
Yes, okay, so we're done with this item, thank you. And,
Anybody that came here just for this agenda item, I would ask, please, that you stay for the next agenda item, where we will be interviewing 2 potential candidates for the MCC for our open seat. You've done the work of coming to this meeting and hearing what we're discussing, what we're all about. Now is another part of it where we're going to make a recommendation on a person to fill our empty seat, and that is as important as anything we're discussing here, because that person will become, upon approval by Board of Supervisors, will become a part of the council. So
thank you, Andrew.
thank you, Andrew. So Andrew. I ask that you please stay, but I understand if you know,
If you can't stay, just leave quietly, please, because we're going to proceed ahead. All right, so the next item on our agenda is applicant interviews and recommendation to fill the Midcoast Community Council vacancy to complete a term ending November 2020. As I wrote in the agenda memorandum, the MCC desires to fill an existing vacancy for a term ending I already said that, which was created by the resignation of Councilmember Laura Stein effective August 15, 2017. The County Manager's Office advertised the vacancy and accepted applications during the period from September 18 through October 20. You think they advertised that like in public notices or something? Okay. And in addition to that, the notice of vacancy was announced on the MCC agenda email list, posted on the MCC website and Facebook page, as well as on the Nextdoor social network in the Midcoast and at the local post offices. The two candidates submitted applications by the deadline. The applications are posted online on our website, and there are copies in the anteroom. Penelope Evelyn Floor, residing in El Granada, that's one, and Barbara Ann Mathewson, residing in Moss Beach. The council will interview the applicants tonight and select one to recommend for appointment by the Board of Supervisors. Actually, they will make the final decision, but we can make a recommendation. So to the applicants, I just wanted to say thank you for your interest in serving your community on the Midcoast Community Council. To state the obvious, there's only one council vacancy at this time, but that doesn't mean that both of you can't pursue your interest and be involved in the issues that come before the council. Robust community involvement is what we need. Only a year from now, 4 council seats will be up for election. I hope your interest and involvement continues and grows. So what I'm going to do is, we have an empty seat, as you can see. So we will interview the candidates one at a time. If you could come up, I'm going to start with the one who sent in your application first, Penelope. Come up to the seat. And so the council members will ask questions which can be tailored to the individual or can be the same question for both candidates. Following questions from the council, the public may ask questions of the applicants or make comments. And we'll start with Penny, and I would just like to step in and ask the first question, if you don't mind. So, on your application, you state, having lived on the coast for such a long time, that you're well aware of the issues, challenges, and opportunities that we have before us. Could you elaborate on the issues that you feel are most important to the Midcoast and how you think the MCC can best work to make progress on those?
Oh boy, that's a list. My personal top of the list is environmental concerns. Environmental preservation is my passion. My avocation, my profession is in child development and children and their growth and their well-being, and I have worked in that field since 1985 on the coast side. I know of big issues around traffic, and I think that this council can do a lot to help with the traffic problems that we have. I think overdevelopment is an issue.
Could you be more specific on what you think we could do about?
I lived in Moss Beach for almost 20 years, and I have personal experience making left turns out of Moss Beach onto Highway 1. And I've seen the changes in the ability to do so over the last 20 years, and it's become a life-threatening process. And I think that addressing traffic flow in areas like Moss Beach, Montera, obviously you're dealing with something in Gray Whale Cove ongoing. I think there's a lot that we could do. Personally, I'm in favor of a traffic circle in Moss Beach that would slow down traffic, provide access for people making turns, provide access for pedestrians crossing the highway, wouldn't involve too much reworking of the existing road bed, that kind of thing. I don't know how specific you want me to get.
That helps, that helps.
I think developers have gotten a rubber stamp from the county for a very long time, and I want to add my voice in opposition to some of that process. I think that businesses that attract a lot of tourists have been given preference over things like the agricultural community, who don't necessarily have the flashy cash flow that they can wave around. I'm thinking specifically of Sam's Chowder House and the problems that that business have caused in El Granada. And I realize that it's technically part of Half Moon Bay, but that road is traveled by citizens of El Granada, and the traffic that results from the Chowder House impacts the residents of El Granada. And I don't think that people should have, because they have a lot of money, because they bring a lot of tourists, should necessarily be running the agenda of the entire Midcoast community. So personally, environment and limiting development and solving some of our issues with traffic are some of my concerns.
Should we go around? Chris,
Like,
for asking questions?
leveraging that question or a different question?
Anything you want to do.
Okay. Sure, I'll go. Hi, Penelope.
Hi.
Question for you, which was asked of me as well. In your opinion, from your perspective, no wrong answer, but from your perspective, what's the role of the MCC? What function do you see or envision even, whether that's currently or where you would like to take it, the role, the function of the MCC?
Well, it's difficult being a resident of unincorporated Coastside because we're a voting minority in the county, and yet we have very specific needs and concerns here that can get lost when issues are put before the county as a whole. We have different issues than Redwood City has as a community. And I think the Midcoast Community Council's job is to present the needs and the wants and the desires of the Coastside as strongly as we possibly can to those people in government and the county level. I would be a strong advocate. I'm a passionate speaker. I speak for a living as a professor, and I want to have data-driven arguments, airtight data-driven arguments to present to the county government that advocate for the well-being of Coastsiders.
Just one follow-up question then to the next person. How would you ascertain what the Midcoast, how the Midcoast as an entity, as a body feels? Where would you get the input and able to strongly bring that position to the Board of Supervisors?
Well, I think that that's a real challenge and it's a real problem, and I think that we need to step up our efforts in community outreach and in taking well-crafted community surveys on issues. It's lovely that there are a lot of people at this meeting, but there aren't, 20 people here? I mean, we can do a lot more to publicize and to advocate for more community involvement, and certainly do a better job of polling for community input, reaching out.
Thank you.
Wanna go next?
Yes, hi Penelope. So,
People mostly call me Penny, so
okay.
please do.
Penny.
Good to know.
So you've been on the coast side 38 years?
Yes.
Yeah. And so you worked at the toddler center for 17 years. You must have met a lot of local families.
Several hundred coastside children have been through my hands.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
You mentioned your top priority was environmental.
Yes.
Do you want to be, can you be a little more specific on what in particular you would be looking at?
I really just want to put the brakes on development and leave as much open space as possible as open space. Decisions that have been made, currently in my life, I have the time and the energy to devote to this kind of activity. I haven't in the past. I've been much more busy with my work, and now I'm kind of scaled back. I teach only part-time. But decisions that have been made in the community in the past have really pained me. The Wave Crest thing, I cry over that. It hurts. And I'd like to see the aspects of this community that make it a special place, that make it a place people want to pay $1 million to live in, that make it a place that tourists want to come to, that keep the character of the coastside that has made it this incredible gem, and to see it degraded into something commercial and paved over, and it pains me. I remember when there was one traffic light in town, and a lot of the changes have been great, but a lot of them have been to the detriment of the charm that the coastside has. It's unique and special to here.
Obviously, you've been involved in public service with the childcare issues. Have you had any other involvement in public service or government?
No, not directly, except for the fact that I've been politically engaged since I was a little child. Both my parents held public office in the town where I grew up. I've always been handing out leaflets, knocking on doors, campaigning, busy, politically active, but I have not held public office before.
That's all.
I'll ask a follow-up. I'll slightly change it because of what Claire just asked. Have you been somewhat regularly involved with any government body or board or commission in any way? Following it, talking before it, anything?
I've been following issues for a long time. I've been writing letters, certainly voting, attending meetings, talking to candidates for public office, that kind of thing as a citizen for the entire time that I've lived here. But I haven't sat on any committees or...
I wasn't thinking so much of sitting on committees as being involved with an elected body, watching the way they work, or even an appointed commission. Just curious. Okay, second question. You talked about outreach, and since all of us have struggled with it, as Lisa mentioned earlier, do you have one specific thing that you think would do a better job of getting information out to the community or getting feedback from the community?
Well, yeah, the Half Moon Bay Review does a pretty horrible job, I think, of publicizing and reporting on. I wonder if there's a Half Moon Bay reporter here, review reporter here tonight. But I find out about meetings in the review like that happened the day before. I just really think that that having a real liaison with the paper and pushing them to do a better job might help a lot. It's just off the top of my head, first idea. I mean, I'm sure you people have tried. I don't know. I don't know the history of.
Could I just tag on one little clarifying to that? So, what source do you count on to stay informed about local government planning and environmental issues? Local, I mean Midcoast.
I've recently gotten involved on Nextdoor, and I've been involved with the review and the talk about section on the review, online mostly, and neighbors, talking to neighbors and friends, and being part of the community and working in the community. I hear a lot, people talk about stuff. I mean, for instance, when I was working at the Coastside Infant Toddler Center, we had issues before the school board, so we went to a lot of school board meetings. So just that kind of thing, be word of mouth mainly.
Okay. Brandon, do you have questions?
I have 3 questions. To tag on off Chris' question, so do you see any possibility of the Midcoast Community Council taking a lead on any issues or in local control governance?
I'm not sure what
Alright.
you're.
All right, let me get back to it later on. Do you support more local control? More, more.
Over county control, you mean?
Yes, meaning more local decisions being made in Midcoast than over the county.
Yes, I think I do. I don't know if that's. I don't know if that's possible. I don't know how that would happen. I don't know. I don't know the legalities of the jurisdiction or any of that stuff. I expect I'll learn those things.
And the other question is, you talked about that you kind of want to kind of tamp down the massive developments, and you also talked about you want to make this a place for tourists to come and as for visitors. How do you kind of balance that to, because our economy is supported by tourism, how do you balance this visitors, and residents?
Our economy is partly dependent on tourism. When I first lived here, this community was self-supporting. It was an agricultural community, it was a fishing community. When I first moved into Moss Beach, I was a blue-collar worker. I didn't have any money. I had a house in Moss Beach. My next-door neighbor was a police officer. The man who lived across the street was a fisherman. The roads weren't paved, and we could all afford to live here. In the 1980s, the character of the coastside changed, and it became a bedroom community to Silicon Valley. Most of the people who live here don't work here. Most of the people who live here commute to work somewhere else. The sense of community in my time living here has changed from a tight-knit community with its own interests to a tourist mecca. And the tourism is nice. It brings money into the community, and a lot of business people make their living because of that. But also the community has suffered. You can't buy a pair of shoes in Half Moon Bay. You have to drive over the hill for everything. Once upon a time, there were real stores on Main Street. You didn't have to go over the hill for every little thing. So we had tourists then. We have tourists now, but it's a different quality. And if everything here becomes just the same as everything everywhere else, if Half Moon Bay becomes Daly City, then nobody's going to want to come here anymore. And what do we got? So I see a balance between maintaining a viable, functioning town and allowing for tourist activity, but not to base our entire livelihood on the vagaries of the tourist trade. Businesses, local businesses who cater only to tourists, I've seen them come, I've seen them go. It's the businesses that cater to the local people, that develop a loyal local following. Those are the businesses that thrive and prosper. So there has to be some consideration of the people who stay here and not catering entirely only to those people who might show up on Saturday afternoon.
Okay, I'd like to know if anybody in the audience has questions to ask. Bill?
Hi Penny, my name is Bill Keogh. I live in West Beach.
Hi.
I helped get the MCC going back in the late 80s to represent the community. I'm curious, you said you're anti-development. Well, I'm putting with it, you don't want to see as much development happening out here as you.
I think that some developers have gotten a kind of rubber stamp to do whatever they want.
Okay.
And I want to just put a stop to the rubber stamp. I want more, people here want everybody to slow down on the marijuana issue and take their time and consider every possible ramification. I feel that that is necessary for development on the coast side, and I'm not sure that's always happened.
Okay, and now let me get to my question, because that was just a lead-in. Are you familiar with the local coastal plan, the local county plan?
Yes.
So you know that they have a cap on the number of parcels that can be developed every year.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's going to happen no matter what. There's probably no undoing of that. In fact, if anything, it's only going to increase the next time they do a modification to the local coastal plan.
And that's
So
why I'd
my
like
que-
to be on this council, because I believe that we could have input on the development of the next local coastal plan.
Yeah, good luck with that. Having sat in that position and tried that before.
Well, someone's got to try, right?
I did, and they're going to do what they want to do. I'm being blunt. I can tell this to Supervisor Horsley. So, given that, the idea of going back to where we were pre-1980 versus the 21st century and millennials who buy everything at Amazon. I'm now retired. I'm at home. The most traffic on my street is FedEx, UPS, and that. So I don't think Main Street could come back, even with a ton of money from the marijuana growers or whatever that may happen eventually. We are a tourist-based economy. We are confined to a two-lane road, north-south and east-west. And so the issues that the Midcoast Community Council has to deal with are really a lot of land use issues. And then things like traffic, which you mentioned, unfortunately, I also sat through a lot of those meetings. They're dictated by the state. It's a state highway, 92 and the other one.
Well,
And
excuse
you
me,
find
but
out-
land use issues have a great deal of impact on traffic. Moss Beach is a perfect example. I believe there is permits granted for development of quite a large number of homes in Moss Beach Heights.
That's not true yet.
Well, that's being considered.
It's under discussion.
And having been a resident of Moss Beach for a long time, since 1985, I know how difficult it is to get a water permit in Moss Beach. I know that when I
That's
tried to
not-
add a third
that's
bathroom
not
to
true
my
either.
household, I was turned down because there was no water available for a
that's-
third bathroom in my household. But the permits were available for all those new houses.
Okay.
And those
Excuse me,
houses are
excuse
going
me.
to impact
Can I
traffic.
finish?
Hold on.
Can I finish? Because the data you're
Well,
handing
you're not
me-
asking me a question, you're giving me a lecture.
No, well, maybe you feel it's that way, but you're throwing a lot of data out here. So the water permits have been active now for 3 to 4 years. That moratorium was taken off quite a while ago. So that's why you're seeing more development. So what you just said was previous from 5 years ago.
And it's issues like that that I'm interested
So-
in going forward in
so
the
I'm a-
future. I know I can't prevent things that happened in the past, but I
Okay,
can
but-
add my voice to what
So,
might be happening in
one
the
last
future.
question.
Really quick, because we're running, we need to get to the next
Okay.
candidate.
How many MCC meetings have you attended over the past 2 years?
None.
Thank you.
Okay, so I think we've been on this for 25 minutes, so we need to get to the next candidate.
Okey-doke.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Barbara? Once again, can I dive in first? Barbara, you've been regularly attending MCC meetings for well over a year. Considering the purpose of the MCC as stated in the bylaws, what is the MCC doing well, and how could we improve?
Well, I think the MCC is doing a great job. I think you've done everything possible to make the community aware of what's going on in the community. It's up to us as citizens to stay aware, whether it's read the paper, be on Nextdoor, check the website, which is excellent. Anything you want to know going back years, you can find. I think that listening to what the people have to say and speaking for them is important for this group. It's the only way we have to talk with the county, where we can do it on our time and not have to go over at 9:30 in the morning in Redwood City. I think you provide us with great information. You give us great forums for any group that wants to talk or provide a presentation. So I think you're doing a good job. I don't have any complaints.
Okay, shall we start at the other end this time? Brandon, you want to go first?
Yes, my first question to you, you said that, right here it says, I saw that my issue was nothing compared to other issues we deal with here. You used to have a negative view of the MCC. What were the other issues you're talking about?
Well, I originally started coming to the MCC because I helped establish resist density. And when I first came to the MCC, I came and I stood up there and I hollered and screamed at all of the members that were here at the time, and felt that it was the only thing going on the coast, and that was going to be, we were going to stop it. And as time went on and I started coming to meetings for basically about the last year and a half, I saw that that was just a little piece of all the things that are going on the coast. And so I really changed my tune about how I felt about the MCC, and that if I wanted to see things through and be made aware of things, I had to come to meetings, and that's what I've been doing.
And do you support the concept of local control?
No, I don't. I moved to an unincorporated area for a reason, and I don't believe in that, no.
Got it. And the unincorporated area has one of the advantages of an incorporated area over incorporated is its lower taxes, both on property. Do you support the lower taxes arrangement?
I'm not sure I understand what you're talking about.
All right, so basically, you pay less taxes than if you live in the city regarding properties.
Okay.
And do you support remaining independent and not being annexed by by either Pacifica or Half Moon Bay?
I am against that, no. I want to stay unincorporated.
That's all the questions I have.
Dave?
So I know because of resistance that you were involved in planning issues. Of the other issues that you've seen facing the MCC over the last year plus, is there a particular issue that you think you would want to work on, or that you think the MCC in general should spend more time on?
Well, I know that Laura had some projects that she was working on, and I would be more than happy to carry on with those. Traffic is definitely one of my issues. I've gone to all the Coast Side meetings over the couple of years that they've had them. I feel like that's kind of antiquated now. But traffic is definitely something. The view corridor, I really support keeping the view open. I'm very interested in seeing what's going on with Big Wave. And I think the tourism is important down here. It's part of, I've lived here my entire adult life, and I've seen it change like everyone else, but that's just why we live here. We're so lucky to live here that we have to learn how to all live together.
And I'll ask a variation of what Claire and I asked Penny. Are there other government bodies besides the MCC that you would interact with on a regular basis through some period of your life?
Government-wise?
Yeah. Or large nonprofits, or
Well, I'm past president of the local Native Daughters of the Golden West. I was president of the Half Moon Bay PAC and the class of 2000, it's grad night. I took the Committee for Green Foothills leadership class. That was about 8 or 9 months. I took that last year. And coming here.
yeah.
Okay.
I think you touched on this. What I was going to ask you originally was, you have been coming here for like a year and a half, and you say you have a different perspective on things than you did when you first started coming. And I was going to ask what you'd learned during that time. I think you've pretty much addressed it. Is there anything else you want to add to that? If you don't, that's fine.
Yeah, I don't think so. I still have my issues with the project at the end of my street. More of my concerns are safety as opposed to what's going in there, but it's the safety of everybody that lives there and who could live there. But other than that, the bluffs, I'd like to follow up and see what's going on with those houses on there. But that's about it.
Barbara, so you've been on the coast side, greater life, adult life. How long in Moss Beach?
In Moss Beach since '99.
Okay. And yeah, Moss Beach is, well, there's a lot of kind of dangerous areas, I guess, on Highway 1. But Moss Beach is definitely one of them. And do you have, I'm also very interested in traffic issues and essentially doing our absolute best to avoid more gridlock. But we have to find a way to get pedestrians that want to cross the road, to get them across safely. So it's a challenge. Do you have any ideas, or do you,
I like the idea of the roundabout. I'm totally against signals. I don't think we need any more signals down here. Hearing about Gray Whale Cove and all the stuff that's going to go on down there, I guess that's what we have to do for safety, but I just hate seeing that nice little stretch of land get more lit up, or
like
to
Daly
be
City.
lit up, right. I don't know, where I live at Carlos and Highway 1, I run my dog across there every afternoon, and it's, you know, you're taking your life in your hands, trying to get across there. There was a life taken within since I've lived there, of a woman running across the street there. I don't know how to address that. I think it should be an island. I don't think a roundabout's gonna be work there, but that's another popular crossing spot. There's a bus stop headed southbound right in front of the hostel. You can't even see the sign, and people are supposed to stand on the side of the highway to catch the bus. Those are things that I think need to be changed, and they're just not being addressed.
Similar to what I asked Penny, and I think Brandon and Lisa have also asked variants of this question, but I'm still in my own mind working through this question, so I'm curious as to how other people feel about it. And that is your perspective on the role of the MCC. Is it a driver of issues? Is it an advocacy group? Is it a group that reflects community input, and that's its mission, is to take that community consensus, if you can get that, or that community perspective, and deliver it to the Board of Supervisors? Is it something in between? And it's a personal question. Again, there's no wrong answer, because I don't know in my own head where I come down on it either, but I'm curious what your position is.
Well, I've only been in the audience in the past, so I really don't know what your interaction is with Supervisor Horsley and the rest of the Board of Supervisors. I look at the MCC as an advisory council to advise to the Board of Supervisors how we feel as citizens. I think we're a forum, or the MCC is a forum for people to come here tell you how they feel, and I would hope that the MCC would take that to Supervisor Horsley and let him know how we feel regardless of what our personal feelings are. I think the MCC does a great job hosting other groups. This thing that would open out of school that MidPen put on, I don't think that the MCC really oversaw that. I think it would have been done differently if it had been. But I think that you pretty much know the current of what's going on in the community and on the Midcoast.
Okay, can I get one more question? So I wanted to ask Penny the same question either, but I was heartened to hear that she's now working part-time. So it's a question that I ask. I've had a chance with the supervisors to interview people for other committees and stuff. It's an important question because I made this mistake myself of jumping in, like getting over my head, and that is, given that it's 9:45 and this was a two-item agenda, I can't believe we're still here at 9:45. Do you have the energy and the commitment to to put the work in? And when I say that, I mean reading the 100-page draft ordinance and the staff report for that agenda item, and maybe 2 or 3 others, and it's not a critique of anybody's lifestyle or their priorities, but we have on this council have had in the last few years a couple people leave because the time commitment was too much for them, that they thought, well, I mean, the MCC, it's an advisory council, but the amount of documentation that you need to look through to be a responsible member of the committee is significant. Then there's the meetings, and then there's other community meetings that you need to go to stay informed. Is that something that you're interested in? And I'm sorry I didn't get to ask Penny the same question, but I'll just assume that her answer is yes, but I'm curious about yours.
Well, I'm glad you asked that because as the board knows, I ran against Brandon in the last election, and that was a big issue at that time. I worked for PG&E for 46 years, and I just put in to retire. I was taking care of my grandchildren in Brentwood, and it was like, how am I going to do this? And I just didn't see how it was going to work. I'm now retired. I do not take care of my grandchildren anymore, sadly, and I do have the time. And I'm willing to do whatever, pick up wherever Laura left off and doing that. But yes, to answer your question, yes.
Thank you.
Members of the public? Bill?
Hi, Barbara. Coquillo, my speech.
Bill.
I'm going to grill you now, too.
Thank you.
But I'll be quick. Are there any issues? Well, let me start with this way. So it's not just Supervisor Horsley. I personally know that Lisa has numerous contacts in all the different divisions underneath Horsley, and that's where the real information comes from. For the most part, when you talk to the supervisor, they know the 50,000-foot level, but the devil's in the details when you need to write a document or a report. Are you interested in doing that kind of work to support Lisa in that role? Because there is a lot of it, and I know how overwhelming it can get. And I know Dave does some of it, and Chris has done a little, but everybody who gets on the board should be spending time doing that. So would you build up your Rolodex and contacts there? And I'm not saying every department. I mean, when I was on the board, I know Len was really big on parks and stuff, and he knew every park agency from here to Seattle and things like that. So can you do stuff like that? And if so, what general area would you go after?
What general area would I go after?
Yeah,
in the county?
well, I mean, traffic, environment,
Well,
housing.
you know what I really think, Bill,
Health.
is probably last month we had Chad from, what was he from?
It's from the CEC.
Right, and he talked about a disaster plan, and with the fires and everything that happened up north, I don't think, at least I'm not aware that we actually have something.
Yes, we
in
do.
plan.
I'll introduce
Okay,
you.
well,
I'll
that's good,
introduce you to it.
that's good. So, but that's something I think that the MCC should maybe get behind.
And they haven't, to all fairness. I've been
Okay.
sort of representing them and feeding back what little information we get. But I'll tell you one thing that would be really good there, and I think I've talked to Lisa about this before, is that they tend to be Half Moon Bay focused like everybody else on the coastline. And the reason is that it's easier to deal with them because they have an organizational structure that OES can follow, whereas they don't know MCC, they go directly to the Board of Supervisors through their own chain of command, and we're sort of forgotten about. And that's an issue, and you mentioned the DART thing that's gonna happen this Saturday. If you have a chance, run by and see it and get some names. To move on to another question, I have seen you here for the past year and a half, you know, soaking it in. I did follow your campaign, and if I could just say this to all the council members, Barbara was endorsed by the Coastside Democrats with an 80% voter approval, and that was a busy meeting, almost 60+ voters there. So a lot of people liked what you had to say, and it's always good that if you're putting in the time and people know you to do that. But one last issue, and sort of awkward, but I'm going to ask you anyway. We talked tonight about the homelessness in behind Half Moon Bay, Safeway. Mid-Penn has a solution, not a perfect solution, but a solution. And it's certainly not going to be enough to solve that problem. But homelessness on the coast side, along with health services, are at like very low going on here. Is somebody from the council going to start kicking the Board of Supervisors saying, hey, we need more of those kind of services out here? Because we don't have them. Would you look into something like that? Would you think that's something you want to do?
Well, I agree that there's a homeless problem in Half Moon Bay, but I don't see that we have one up here.
There is.
Is there one? Because
It's more.
It's more of,
It's
is it
hidden
what,
more
the
because
RVs
it's
on
there.
airport or?
No, well, there may be some over there, but in the back in the hills, you know, they blend in. They're not going to go and hang out underneath the street light, so you don't see them. But and to be honest with you, if Half Moon Bay starts cracking down,
They're gonna come here, yeah.
where else are you going to go? But
Can you make this into a question?
the question is that though there's no group on the council right now working directly with, at least that I know of.
I would be happy to do that. I would
to
be,
start
I'd
bringing
have to
this
learn
up,
about it, but I'd be happy to.
With the Board of Supervisors and their staff as to what programs that are available on the other side of the hill can we get, maybe if it's only once or twice a month, to come out here and run a program to identify and help people in need. Thanks.
Anybody else in the audience?
Should I ask? I didn't ask a question before. Should I ask the same question to both candidates? No, it doesn't matter. Okay. Well, I have been involved in MCC and used to be on MCC myself some time ago. And more recently, I'm very interested in what's happening with our parks. And as you know, we have a county park in El Granada. But there's a lot of more room for parks, and it's become a big issue recently. In fact, there was a meeting held here not too long ago, and we have something right here at Granada Sanitary District, a community services district, that also wants to get a little bit more into the world of parks. And I'd like to know, what do you think MCC's role should be in that?
Well, again, I think that we can facilitate meetings, but as far as making decisions, I don't see that we would be able to make decisions like that, but we can have community meetings and put recommendations through. But I don't see where we can make the decisions to get parks. I think we can highly recommend it, but I don't see that we have the teeth to build another park down here. I don't.
Well, you're correct about that. It has to be something that's decided and financed by the county. But previous MCCs, people have been very involved in parks, and that's how Quarry Park existed, how it is now. But I think that, I was just wondering what you think that MCC's role should be, other than just advocating.
Well, I don't know what to say on that one. I really don't have any
Well, I
answer
have one
for
other
you.
question, and this is a short one. I was at a meeting very recently that was held, in fact, right here, as a lot of meetings now are being held here. And this was one where it became quite obviously to me, and again tonight, that there's a lot of people who live in the area who don't really have an understanding of the unincorporated world as opposed to the city of Half Moon Bay. There were a lot of people who kept saying, well, we must do this, and they were saying county parks should be, and they didn't say county parks, they wanted something to happen in Quarry Park. And so just a lot of things like that, and a lot of people there living in Half Moon Bay didn't understand that if they want that, they need to contact somebody at the county about Quarry Park. So I'm just wondering what you might think you could do to help situations like that.
Well, that is a good question, because there were people here this evening that
Exactly.
it had that
That's why
exact,
I'm
they
bringing
didn't
it up, yeah.
understand, and it was very confusing. I wish there was a way that we could work really well with Half Moon Bay about certain things, but, and I don't know how that ever is gonna happen. It's nice to see Harvey coming to the meetings, and telling us what's going on. I don't know if he goes back and does the same.
I guess my question is so much educating people that live here. In other words, if they have concerns, and they were talking about something would have to be happening, if people would have to call and complain about things, who do they complain to? If there's an issue with something like Quarry Park, they don't go to MCC unless
Right.
they want to be. So I mean, it's just something like that. I'm hoping that somebody on MCC can help try and make that better, educate people, you might say.
Well, I think this board does I think they do a great job.
Oh,
Or
I'm
this
not
council
complaining.
does
No,
a-
I'm just asking any new ideas you might bring, that's all.
Oh, well, we do have to,
Okay, just a little more time to be fair to the two. Barbara has a little more time. Does anybody have any follow-up questions for Barbara? Or are we good?
We're good.
Yeah. Are you open to learning new things on the council? Like just in general, are you open to learning new people who have opposing ideas in the audience? Listening to them.
of course, that's part of the job, of listening to what other people think and have an open mind. That's important.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Thanks, Barbara. Okay,
Thank you,
council. I'm ready to vote tonight. Does anybody want to postpone this to the next meeting?
We should get it over with.
Yeah, no, we should do it tonight.
All right, so anybody want to make a nomination, or?
I will nominate Barbara Matheson
I'll
as
second.
our recommendation.
I'll second that. Discussion?
Do we need discussion?
I think we're really lucky to have two people that are obviously really interested and have deep roots in the Midcoast. I think we're very fortunate. It's hard decision.
Yeah, we got to pick one or the other. As I said in the beginning, it's a thrill to have two people and to have to make this decision. And I hope, well, getting ahead of myself. Just anybody else?
Yeah, I would say that, again, I made the mistake of thinking like, oh, I'll just get in, I'll jump in with both feet, and I got way overextended. And so it's important to hear that both candidates have the time and the commitment. I mean, it's really important, and I would love to see this council stay at 7 for full terms. I'm not sure the last time that happened. It's been a while, even though we've tried hard. So once again, we have two, as when we discussed Claire, we have excellent candidates, and I hope that whichever candidate is not selected will consider running for 2018. As I said, there's going to be 4 seats open, including some of ours. So please run and de-seat me if the public so chooses. We'll get the best person in here. So we've got 2 great people that I hope to see more of in the future. I think for me, based on my experience of getting in over my head, it's not only being familiar with the issues, it's understanding the mechanisms at play, and that is the jurisdictions, what ordinances apply to what groups have oversight over what topics, and it's that wisdom and experience that, well, I'm not you don't look at me and you think wisdom, I know, but I would say like you just acquired experience and wisdom with understanding how kind of the system works. That is the critical element for me based on my personal experience. So I'm looking for a candidate who is familiar with the groups that are on the coast side and how they operate and function literally within a meeting setting, how the meeting progresses and what are the parts of the meeting and how that goes along. So that's an important consideration for me. And that will be the number one thing based on my own personal experience.
Anybody, any further discussion before we vote?
Yeah, I just wanted to say I'm just really excited about the passion, the care about our community that was discussed by both candidates. Two great candidates. It's going to be really tough. I mean, really tough for me. But I do kind of have to lean towards candidate that's been involved and been actually going through the process. In fact, I've helped another candidate. But I just want to say, whoever does not win, I think you're probably going to win the election the next term, next run. And also, not being a MCC member doesn't preclude you from,
continuing to go.
Yeah, having a voice here and paying attention to the agendas. So when the issues come up, and supervisor's sitting over there, he's here hearing. So yes, it's gonna be a tough one for me.
Anything to say before we vote?
I want to say thank you for both candidates for applying. It's lucky we actually have two candidates. We're one of the agencies that kind of, aren't really as thought of on the Midcoast, compared to the fire district, which, kind of had a very hot history, no pun intended. It's really glad we're having some more involvement in this agency and having more, people come to our meetings. That's good, and having issues being discussed and being disseminated among the communities. That's really good compared to what we have before in the past decade when not a lot of people came to meetings.
I'd like to say one.
Okay.
I'm probably the last person here that was chosen with this process. And I know how difficult it is to sit here and watch us up here decide what's going to happen with you for the next 4 years or whatever it is. And you have my sympathies. However it goes, we all appreciate the effort that you've done, that you've made to come here. And sitting up there is not easy. And you both did really well. That's all.
All right, so we have a
I have
nominee.
Chair, I have a question about the process because as you recall, when we went through with Claire, I had to abstain on the motion because the question was phrased such as, okay, those in favor of Claire, those against Claire, and my comment was, I'm not voting against anybody. I don't want to vote against, say like I vote against Claire or how can we do that so that we're not voting against people?
Dave?
I tried to do that with my wording.
Okay.
Can you restate the motion?
Yeah. I nominated Barbara Matheson as our recommended applicant for the position.
Just a question. So this position, is this up for election next year or 2000?
No, this finishes Laura's term,
Got it.
which ends in 2020.
All right.
So this is not voting against anyone. If this doesn't pass, then we'll nominate somebody else.
Understood.
Okay.
Understood. Yes.
So, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
6-0.
Do we need to have a separate motion?
No,
What?
that's
No.
done. That's who we're going to recommend to Don Horsley, and he actually gets to, he could ignore what we say, just like, but that's our recommendation. So, yes, I do hope that you will continue to attend meetings and make your voice heard. And
you'll be sick of me, don't worry.
Right.
We are never sick of anything.
That's
There are
great.
4 seats in 2018.
Yeah, so, thank you very much.
Thank you for applying.
So we're gonna rush through here, it's running late. Are you okay on the tape, Steve? All right, council activity? Anybody?
I've got one, I attended the Half Moon Bay Planning Commission meeting last night. The city has hired Dr. Charles Lester as a consultant on their general plan LCP LUP process. He spoke for 45 minutes, summarizing the history, very briefly summarizing the history of the coastal program.
Past California Commission or
Yes,
Director?
the ex-director of the California Coastal Commission.
The video's posted on YouTube if you want to watch it.
And it is well worth watching. He particularly summarized the Half Moon Bay history, and then the Planning Commission and to some degree the members of the audience asked questions of him about where they thought applicable to the areas they were particularly concerned about. And it was very informative. No decisions were made, obviously. They had a joint meeting last month on some of the issues for the general plan. They're having another one probably in December, I'm guessing, from what I heard last night, which will be a joint meeting with the Parks and Rec Commission. So the other thing that came up at the end of the meeting is the staff documents for the signal at the south end of Main, Highway 1, will probably come to the Planning Commission November 12th. So for those interested in traffic issues and traffic lights, you might want to plan on attending that one. I think that was it.
Anybody else have activity? I do. Just to tack on to what Ellie said about the Broadway bench ribbon cutting, Supervisor Horsley spoke, and I spoke on behalf of the MCC. Thanked County Parks and DPW for their efforts with the bench. On a side, also there were 3 members of the Planning Commission there, Kumkum Gupta, Fred Hansen, and Zoe. And there were lots of people from County Parks and DPW, and Barbara Matheson was there to represent. Midcoast, I had a side conversation with Parks Superintendent Scott Lombardi. He said I asked him about the gravel and their effort to put dirt over it, and it's the gray rock there, and he said they're going to continue to use the gray aggregate from the local quarry. They will not seek out the brown rock from Marin quarry used by GGNRA for their park trails. He said the Pillow Point Bluff Trail rocking project that was announced for this fall is postponed until spring. The other item I have is October 18 Harbor Commission meeting I attended regarding 2 items with potential future public meeting space. The agenda item seeking board direction on investigating options for permanent owned admin building now was controversial, and the general manager will likely table that for now. The agenda item to move ahead with the leased admin office alterations was approved. I spoke as the MCC in favor of them doing that, and I said I hope the MCC will be able to use the meeting room. It's larger than this one. The layout plan has 30 audience seats, and just for starters, and then the table in the front seats 11.
Wait, can you repeat where the location is?
It's right below us, right? On the second floor.
Oh, okay.
Is the
Second
meeting
floor.
generally, meeting room in this, kind of this side of the building?
I have
I've
no
never been
idea.
there.
It's twisted
no
90
idea.
degrees.
Oh, twisted 9, okay.
And it is somewhat larger.
And they voted to go ahead with the alterations. I don't know how long that'll take, but when I asked I told them that I had coveted that room ever since they moved there, and then hoped we could get to use it, and I got some laughs, so I don't think they'll turn us down if we want to.
Did they have any plans of what they were gonna do, or any written description of,
Yeah, there-
It's in the
of
staff
what?
report. It's in the staff report.
So it's a detailed description of what they're actually gonna do?
Yep.
Yeah,
Wall,
and it's
bathroom.
posted on our website, where
Okay,
I
good.
announced the meeting.
I'll look
Yeah.
at that, thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? Can we adjourn?
I move we adjourn.
We are adjourned. Thank you.
Yay, before 10.